Picture this, a city at the height of its glory, bustling markets, grand temples, thriving communities vanishes completely, not just from sight, but from human memory, as if it never existed at all. For over 1,000 years, some of the world's greatest civilizations slipped into the shadows of history, their stories buried beneath sand, water, and time. How does an entire metropolis simply disappear? What forces could erase such monumental achievements from the maps and minds of generations? These aren't just questions for historians. They're mysteries that tug at something deep within us, a shared curiosity about the fragility of human accomplishment and the secrets waiting to be uncovered. Today, we're setting out on an extraordinary journey to rediscover 21 of these lost cities, places that were once centers of culture, trade, and innovation before fading into legend. From the sun-scorched deserts where Petra's rose-red cliffs were forgotten for centuries, to the dense jungles that concealed Machu Picchu's stone terraces, each of these locations tells a powerful story about resilience, adaptation, and the unpredictable turns of history. We'll explore how natural disasters, shifting climates, economic changes, and human conflicts conspired to wipe these places from the known world, and how centuries later, a combination of ancient texts, archaeological dedication, and modern technology has brought them back into the light. What makes these rediscoveries so compelling isn't just the awe-inspiring architecture or the priceless artifacts, it's what they reveal about ourselves. These cities challenge our assumptions about the past, showing us sophisticated societies that mastered their environments in ways we're only beginning to understand. They remind us that civilization is both durable and delicate, capable of creating wonders yet vulnerable to the forces of nature and time. As we walk through these forgotten landscapes together, we'll not only uncover how they vanished and why they matter, but we'll also reflect on what their stories can teach us about our own world today. So come along, let's step into the shadows of history and bring these magnificent places back to life. Think about the last time you walked through a bustling city center. The energy, the noise, the sheer concentration of human life. Now imagine that entire place, every street and building, every story and secret, completely wiped from memory. Not just ruined or abandoned, but forgotten so thoroughly that for centuries, no one even knew it had ever existed. This is the powerful allure of the lost city. It's more than just archaeology. It's a profound reminder of our own impermanence. These places were once the heartbeats of their world's centers of immense power, revolutionary innovation, and vibrant culture. Their disappearance isn't just a historical footnote. It represents a rupture in the human story, a silent gap where generations of knowledge, art, and lived experience simply vanished. What causes a city to fall off the map? The reasons are as complex and varied as the cities themselves. Sometimes it's a single, catastrophic event. A volcano erupts, burying a city in ash and freezing it in a single moment, as happened to Pompeii. A massive earthquake can topple even the most advanced structures, disrupting water supplies and trade routes until a place is no longer habitable. In other cases, the end comes more slowly, a gradual fading away. Changes in climate can turn fertile farmlands into desert, starving a population. Rivers that once provided life-giving water and transportation might shift course or silt up, stranding a city inland and cutting it off from the world. Economic collapse can empty a city as surely as any invasion, when the trade that fueled its wealth dries up or moves elsewhere. And of course, there is human conflict. Wars have erased countless cities, not only through destruction but through the dismantling of power structures. When an empire falls, its regional capitals often lose their reason for being. Conquerors might deliberately scatter populations, salt the earth, or simply neglect a city until it crumbles back into the landscape. But perhaps the most fascinating disappearances are those that come from a simple, collective decision to leave. When life becomes too hard, when resources are too scarce, or when belief systems change, people simply walk away. The jungle creeps in, the desert sands drift over the plazas, and within a few generations, the city passes from memory into myth. Rediscovering these places is like putting together a massive, planet-sized puzzle with most of the pieces missing. For a long time, the only clues came from ancient texts, the tantalizing descriptions in Homer's Iliad that led Heinrich Schliemann to Troy, or the accounts of early explorers who heard local legends of a great city in the jungle. Modern archaeology has given us incredible new tools. Satellite imagery and LiDAR technology can peer through dense forest canopies to reveal the ghostly outlines of streets and foundations hidden for 1,000 years. Underwater archaeology has opened up a new frontier, allowing us to find ports and cities that were swallowed by the sea due to rising waters or seismic activity. Each discovery does more than just add a pin to a historical map. It fundamentally changes our understanding of human history. The lost city of Caral in Peru forced us to rewrite the timeline of civilization in the Americas, proving complex urban life existed there as early as it did in Egypt. The uncovering of Great Zimbabwe shattered colonial-era myths that denied the possibility of sophisticated African kingdoms. These cities force us to confront our assumptions and acknowledge the incredible diversity and resilience of human societies. They show us that progress isn't always a straight line, that advanced knowledge can be lost, and that cultures we might consider ancient were often far more complex and interconnected than we ever imagined. As we journey through these 21 stories of disappearance and rediscovery, look for the patterns that connect them to our world today. The challenges of environmental change, economic interdependence, and cultural exchange they faced are not so different from our own. Their ruins stand as silent teachers, reminding us that no civilization, no matter how powerful or brilliant, is immune to the tides of history. They teach us humility, but also inspire wonder at the enduring human spirit, the drive to build, to create, and ultimately to uncover the secrets of our own past, no matter how deeply they've been buried. Hidden deep within the narrow, winding Sick Canyon of southern Jordan, the lost city of Petra emerges like a mirage from the rose-red cliffs, a testament to human ingenuity in one of the world's most unforgiving landscapes. This wasn't just a city, it was the brilliant capital of the Nabataean kingdom, a civilization that mastered the art of survival and trade in the heart of the desert. What's truly remarkable is how they turned a seeming disadvantage, their remote, arid location, into their greatest strength. By controlling the precious few water sources in the region, the Nabataeans effectively held the keys to the kingdom for any caravan traveling through. They became the undisputed masters of the spice and silk routes, a vital link between the incense-rich fields of Arabia, the grain stores of Egypt, and the bustling ports of the Mediterranean. Their wealth didn't come from conquest alone, but from clever diplomacy and creating essential oases of respite in a vast, thirsty wilderness. The architectural achievements of Petra are nothing short of breathtaking, especially when you consider they were accomplished over 2,000 years ago. The Nabataeans didn't build their city with stone and mortar, they sculpted it directly from the living rock of the sandstone mountains. This technique required an incredible level of planning and skill. They would start at the top of a cliff face, carving downward to create the intricate facades of tombs, temples, and homes, ensuring that any mistakes were literally set in stone. The most famous of these, Al-Kosneh, or the Treasury, stands as their ultimate masterpiece. Its Hellenistic-style columns, statues, and urns are so finely detailed, so perfectly proportioned, that it's difficult to comprehend how it was executed with simple hand tools. The purpose of this building remains a subject of debate. Was it a royal tomb, a temple, or a secure repository for the taxes collected from passing caravans? This air of mystery only adds to its powerful allure. Perhaps even more impressive than the grand monuments was the hidden network of engineering that made life possible here. In a region that receives only about 6 inches of rainfall a year, the Nabataeans became hydrological geniuses. They constructed a complex and extensive system of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipes to collect, channel, and store every single drop of precious water. They carved channels into the solid rock of the Sik to guide water into the city center, and they built massive underground reservoirs that could sustain the population through long periods of drought. This advanced water management didn't just provide drinking water, it allowed for lush gardens and agriculture within the city walls, creating a stunning contrast to the barren desert outside and demonstrating a profound understanding of their environment. For all its grandeur, Petra's golden age could not last forever. A massive earthquake in the year 363 CE struck a devastating blow, destroying many of the city's vital water systems and buildings. But the earthquake wasn't the only factor. The world was changing around them. The Romans had begun to favor sea routes for trade across the Red Sea, bypassing the ancient overland caravan paths that had been Petra's lifeblood for centuries. As the flow of wealth slowed to a trickle, the city's importance dwindled. It was gradually abandoned, its magnificent structures left empty to the wind and the sand. For over 1,000 years, it existed only in vague local legends and was completely absent from any known maps, a forgotten capital of a forgotten kingdom. Its return to the world stage is a story of daring and disguise. In 1812, a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who had immersed himself in Arabic language and customs, heard Bedouin tales of a lost city hidden in the mountains. Posing as a pilgrim named Sheikh Ibrahim, he convinced local guides to take him through the Sik, and there he caught his first fleeting glimpse of the treasury, its facade glowing in the afternoon sun. Fearing his excitement would give away his true scholarly intentions, he could only note its existence in his journal before moving on, but he had achieved what no Westerner had in centuries. His reports sparked a wave of fascination that continues to this day, pulling Petra from the shadows of myth and firmly back onto the map, where it stands as a powerful symbol of what can be lost and what can, against all odds, be found again. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Peruvian Andes, at an altitude that leaves most visitors breathless, sits Machu Picchu, a city of stone seemingly suspended between the earth and the sky. Unlike the desert-carved grandeur of Petra, this Incan marvel is a testament to a different kind of genius, an extraordinary harmony with one of the planet's most dramatic and challenging landscapes. While it's famously dubbed the Lost City of the Incas, that romantic title is a bit of a misdirection. Most archaeologists now believe it was far more than a simple settlement. It was likely a sacred sanctuary, a luxurious royal retreat for the Emperor Pachacuti, and a celestial observatory, all woven into one breathtaking complex. Built around the middle of the 15th century, its existence was a closely guarded secret, a place of immense spiritual and political power hidden away from the common populace in the clouds. The story of its abandonment is just as intriguing as its construction. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, their campaign to dismantle the Incan Empire was brutal and comprehensive. Yet they never found Machu Picchu. There's no evidence they ever even knew it existed. The inhabitants, perhaps forewarned of the advancing conquest or as part of a strategic withdrawal, simply walked away from the city. They may have taken their most valuable possessions with them, but they left the structures themselves perfectly intact. Then the jungle moved in. For over 400 years, the dense, verdant vegetation of the cloud forest crept over the granite walls and stone steps, concealing the city so completely that it became a whispered legend, known only to the local Quechua farmers who lived in the surrounding valleys and who never revealed its location to the outside world. Its modern rediscovery is a tale of luck, persistence, and crucially, the guidance of those who never truly forgot it. In 1911, American historian and explorer Hiram Bingham Roman III was led up the steep mountainside by a young Quechua boy named Pablito Alvarez. Bingham was ostensibly searching for Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Incan rulers, but what he found instead was something far more pristine. As the morning mist burned away, he was confronted by a sight that must have seemed impossible. A vast complex of exquisite stonework terraces, temples, and dwellings, all perfectly preserved despite the vines and trees growing through them. While Bingham is credited with introducing Machu Picchu to the global stage, it's vital to remember that he was following paths that local people had known for generations. They were the true keepers of its memory, and without them, this wonder might have remained hidden for decades longer. The architectural brilliance on display is a humbling lesson in precision engineering. The Incas were masters of what is known as ashlar masonry, cutting massive granite stones so precisely that they fit together without any mortar whatsoever. Not even a razor blade can slide between many of the joints. This technique, combined with the foundations that were designed to move slightly during the frequent earthquakes in the region, is why the walls still stand solidly today, long after many modern structures would have crumbled. But the city is more than just sturdy buildings. It's a landscape entirely engineered by human hands. The entire mountaintop was sculpted with hundreds of terraces. These were not just for agriculture. They were a sophisticated form of structural insurance, preventing the steep slopes from eroding away under heavy rains and providing flat spaces for construction. Perhaps the most captivating aspect of Machu Picchu is its profound and intentional connection to the cosmos. The Incas were keen astronomers, and the entire site is meticulously aligned with celestial events. During the solstices and equinoxes, the sun cast specific shadows through carefully placed windows and onto particular stones, acting as a giant stone calendar. The Intihuatana stone, often called the hitching post of the sun, is a beautifully carved ritual stone that aligns with the sun's position during these key periods. It's believed priests would symbolically tie the sun to this stone during the winter solstice to ensure its return and the rebirth of the seasons. This deep integration of architecture, astronomy, and spirituality reveals a civilization that saw itself as an intimate part of the natural and celestial order, not separate from it. Because it was never found by the Spanish, Machu Picchu offers us a rare, uncorrupted window into Incan culture. There are no colonial churches built on top of temples, no records of looting or deliberate destruction. What we see is essentially a time capsule, frozen at the moment it was abandoned. This purity is what makes it so invaluable to historians and so mesmerizing to visitors. It's not a ruin in the sense of a place that fell into decay. It's a place that was simply left, allowing us to walk its pathways and touch its stones much as the Incas themselves did. Its emergence from the clouds captivated the world's imagination, sparking a renewed and profound respect for the sophistication of pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas, and forever changing our understanding of what they could achieve. For centuries, the tale of Troy lived not in history books but in epic poetry, a grand story of a 10-year war, a giant wooden horse, and the beautiful Helen whose face launched 1,000 ships. To the educated world, it was a magnificent myth, a foundational story from Homer's Iliad that taught lessons about pride, love, and the capriciousness of the gods, but no one seriously believed a place like that had actually existed. It was the stuff of legend, not archaeology. That all changed because of one man, a German businessman turned archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann, who took Homer's verses not as fiction but as a literal treasure map. Driven by an almost obsessive belief and a sizable personal fortune, he arrived at a mound in northwestern Turkey called Hisarlik in the 1870s, convinced that beneath it lay the evidence to turn myth into history. What Schliemann's excavations revealed was far more complex and fascinating than even he could have imagined. He didn't find one city of Troy, he found 9 of them, built one on top of the other over the course of nearly 4,000 years. This was not a single tragic city that burned and was abandoned. It was a location of such immense strategic importance that generation after generation returned to the exact same spot, rebuilding upon the rubble of their predecessors. Each layer, labeled Troy 1 through Troy 9, tells a different story of a different era, from its first fortifications around 3000 BC to its final days as a modest Byzantine town. The city's value was its geography perched on a hill overlooking the entrance to the Dardanelles Strait. It effectively held the gatekeeper's key to all trade and naval movement between the Aegean and the lucrative Black Sea. Controlling Troy meant controlling wealth and power, which is why it was so often fought over, destroyed, and inevitably rebuilt. Schliemann's most famous and infamous discovery was what he dramatically dubbed Priam's treasure, a hoard of exquisite gold jewelry, elaborate headdresses, and ornate vessels that he claimed belonged to the Homeric king himself. In his fervor to reach what he believed was the Homeric level, he famously used dynamite and crude methods that tragically destroyed significant portions of the upper, later settlements, an act that makes modern archaeologists wince. While his claim about Priam was later debunked, the treasure was from a much earlier period. The find was still monumental. It proved that this was a place of immense wealth and sophisticated artistry, a center powerful enough to be the Troy of legend. More importantly, he uncovered evidence of catastrophic fires and fortified walls that had been breached, providing a tantalizing archaeological basis for a historical conflict that could have inspired Homer's epic poem. The city's eventual disappearance was a slow fade into obscurity rather than a dramatic end, as the Roman and later Byzantine empires shifted their trade routes and political centers. Troy's strategic importance dwindled. The silting up of its harbors turned its coastline into land, stranding it inland and cutting it off from the maritime trade that had been its lifeblood for millennia. By the time the Byzantine Empire itself was in decline, the city was completely abandoned, its once great walls and towers slowly crumbling and being buried by wind-blown soil and time. The very mound that had been a beacon of civilization for ages became just another hill in the Turkish landscape, its name and glories past completely forgotten by the outside world, existing only in the pages of a poem many considered pure fantasy. Troy's journey back into the light is a powerful lesson in the interplay between literature and science. Without Homer's enduring story, Schliemann would never have gone looking for it. Without Schliemann's flawed but determined digging, the physical proof of its existence might have remained buried for much longer. Later, more meticulous archaeologists like Carl Blegen and Manfred Kaufmann refined the picture, showing that the layer most likely connected to the Trojan War legend, Troy 7, did show signs of a violent destruction around the generally accepted timeframe of 1200 BC. The story of Troy teaches us that sometimes the seeds of truth are hidden within myth, waiting for the right combination of curiosity, persistence, and evidence to bring a lost world, quite literally, back to the surface. From the legendary siege of Troy, we travel across continents and centuries to a city of an entirely different scale and ambition, a sprawling metropolis that wasn't just a city, but an entire engineered landscape. Deep in the jungles of Cambodia, the Khmer Empire built Angkor, a capital so vast and sophisticated that it challenges our very notions of what an ancient civilization could achieve. At its zenith in the 12th century, Angkor was the largest pre-industrial city on Earth, a complex urban network covering over 1,000 square kilometers, an area larger than many modern metropolises. Its population may have reached 1 million people, a number that would not be matched by European cities for hundreds of years. This wasn't merely a collection of buildings, it was a profound expression of cosmic order and imperial power, carved into the very fabric of the land. The heart of this empire, and its most enduring symbol, is the magnificent temple of Angkor Wat. Even today, it holds the title of the world's largest religious monument, a breathtaking fusion of spiritual ambition and architectural genius. Originally dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, it gradually transformed into a Buddhist site, reflecting the empire's own religious evolution. But Angkor Wat is far more than a place of worship. It is a stone representation of the Hindu universe. Its iconic 5 towers symbolize the mythical Mount Meru, the center of all creation, while the massive moat surrounding it represents the cosmic ocean. Every inch of its sprawling galleries is covered in the most exquisite bas-reliefs, depicting not only scenes from mythology, but also the daily life and military victories of the Khmer kings. It was designed to be a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a statement that the king who built it was a godlike ruler whose capital was the center of the world. The true marvel of Angkor, however, lies not just in its stone temples but in what was built around them, a water management system of staggering complexity and foresight. The Khmers were hydrological masters in a landscape defined by monsoon cycles. They constructed an enormous network of massive reservoirs called barrays, some measuring 5 miles long and 1 mile wide, along with countless canals, moats, and intricate irrigation channels. This system did 3 things brilliantly. It stored vast quantities of water to see the population through the long dry season. It irrigated rice paddies that could produce 3 or 4 harvests a year to feed that immense population, and it likely helped to stabilize the ground beneath the massive stone structures, preventing subsidence. This control over water was the true source of Angkor's power, allowing it to flourish in a challenging environment and support a density of people that seems almost impossible for the era. So how does such an advanced and powerful city vanish? The answer isn't a single cataclysm, but a slow unraveling of the very systems that made it strong. Cutting-edge archaeological techniques like LiDAR radar that can see through the dense jungle canopy have revealed evidence of severe environmental stress. Tree ring data from the region indicates a series of devastating mega-droughts in the 14th and 15th centuries, followed by periods of extraordinarily intense monsoon rains. This 1-2 punch of climate extremes would have been catastrophic for the precisely balanced water network. Droughts would have emptied the reservoirs and led to crop failure and famine, while subsequent extreme floods would have breached canals and dams, wiping out the infrastructure. This environmental pressure was compounded by rising power in neighboring kingdoms like Ayutthaya, which led to invasions and siphoning of trade away from Angkor. The empire didn't suddenly collapse, it gradually contracted, its people migrating toward new centers like Phnom Penh, and the magnificent city was slowly reclaimed by the relentless jungle. For the Western world, Angkor became a ghost story, a rumored lost city of unimaginable scale. That changed in the 1860s when French naturalist Henry Mauhat, hacking his way through the jungle, stumbled upon the ruins. His published journals, filled with awe-struck descriptions and detailed sketches, sent shockwaves through Europe. He famously wrote, "At seeing them, one feels filled with respect, and one cannot but admire the nobles who conceived them and the talented artists who built them. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome." While Mauhat is credited with its introduction to the West, it is crucial to acknowledge that Angkor was never truly lost. The local Khmer people always knew of its existence. They maintained Angkor Wat as a Buddhist monastery and kept its memory alive in their stories and traditions. The Western rediscovery was really a reintroduction, a moment when a local truth became a global wonder. Today, Angkor's story is more relevant than ever. It stands as a powerful case study in the vulnerability of even the most advanced societies to climate volatility and environmental overreach. Some scholars suggest the Khmers may have pushed their ecosystem too far, that their vast deforestation and intensive land use may have exacerbated the very climate problems that ultimately contributed to their decline. Its rediscovery and ongoing preservation efforts, led by teams from around the world, highlight a global commitment to protecting our shared cultural heritage against the dual threats of time and tourism. Angkor teaches us that the greatest monuments are not just testaments to human glory, but also sobering reminders of our dependence on the delicate balance of the natural world. While the slow decline of Angkor is a story of environmental and economic unraveling, the fate of Pompeii was shockingly instantaneous, a single day of cataclysm that suspended an entire city in a terrifying moment. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon in the year 79, the people of this prosperous Roman town near the Bay of Naples had no idea they were living in the shadow of a sleeping giant. Mount Vesuvius wasn't a known volcano to them. It was simply a large, fertile mountain where they grew grapes for some of the region's finest wine. The initial warning signs, small earthquakes in the days prior, were likely dismissed as mere tremors, a common enough occurrence in the region. Then, around 1 in the afternoon, the mountain exploded with a force thousands of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. A massive column of superheated gas, ash, and pumice rock shot 12 miles into the stratosphere, blotting out the sun and plunging the world into an eerie, premature darkness. For the next 18 hours, the city was pummeled by a relentless hail of lightweight pumice stone and thick ash. This wasn't immediately lethal, but it was inescapable. Roofs began to groan and collapse under the accumulating weight, trapping people inside their homes or crushing them where they stood. Many residents chose to flee, clutching their most precious belongings and heading for what they hoped was safety near the shore. Others hunkered down, praying to their gods for deliverance and waiting for the nightmare to pass. They couldn't have known the worst was yet to come. In the early hours of the next day, the volcanic column collapsed under its own weight, sending a series of pyroclastic surges, waves of superheated gas and pulverized rock, traveling at nearly 100 miles per hour and reaching temperatures over 900 degrees Fahrenheit, racing down the mountain slopes and across the landscape. These surges instantly and completely asphyxiated and incinerated every single person and animal still in their path, including those who had thought the sea would offer them an escape. What makes Pompeii uniquely haunting isn't just the violence of its end, but the astonishing completeness of its preservation. The same ash and volcanic material that killed everything in its path also created an airtight seal, protecting the city from the eroding forces of air, moisture, and time for the next 17 centuries. When excavators began their systematic work in the 1700s, they weren't just uncovering stone walls, they were walking into a city frozen on the day of its death. They found loaves of bread still in the oven, jars of fish sauce still on the counter, and coins left on a table. The most poignant discoveries, however, came from a brilliant archaeological innovation. As the soft ash around decomposed bodies hardened, it formed hollow cavities perfectly preserving the shapes of the victims in their final moments. By carefully injecting plaster into these voids, researchers created detailed casts of the people of Pompeii, capturing their exact postures of agony, despair, and the desperate embrace of loved ones trying to shield each other. These figures are not skeletons, they are ghostly silhouettes of real human beings, making the tragedy feel unbearably immediate and personal. This unparalleled preservation offers a slice-of-life view of the Roman world that no history book could ever provide. We can read original political campaign slogans and crude jokes scratched as graffiti onto public walls. We can admire vibrant frescoes depicting mythological scenes, family portraits, and even a famous mosaic of a guard dog with the warning, "Cave Canem, beware of the dog." The layout of homes, bakeries, fast food taverns called thermopolia, and even brothels gives us an intimate understanding of daily routines, social hierarchies, and economic life. We know what they ate, how they decorated their homes, what games they played, and what gods they worshipped. Pompeii effectively allows us to walk through a Roman city with all its noise, color, and vibrancy intact, an experience completely unique in archaeology. The city's initial rediscovery was almost as accidental as its burial. In the late 16th century, an architect digging a canal tunnel stumbled upon the ancient walls and some of the famous frescoes, but the finds were largely ignored, considered pagan curiosities from a forgotten time. It wasn't until 1748 that proper excavations began under the patronage of the King of Naples, and even then, the motivation was often treasure hunting for spectacular artifacts to adorn private collections. The practice was haphazard and often destructive, but it gradually gave way to more scientific methods that recognized the true value was not in the objects alone, but in the entire context of the city. Today, Pompeii is a continuously evolving site, with new discoveries still being made that challenge our assumptions about Roman life, while modern conservation efforts race against time to preserve what has already been unearthed from the elements and the wear of millions of visitors. Pompeii's legacy is a powerful and dual one. It stands as the most visceral reminder of nature's utter unpredictability and overwhelming power, a lesson that resonates deeply in a world still dealing with volcanic and seismic threats. Yet, from that same destruction comes an incredible gift to humanity, a perfectly preserved moment that allows us to reach across 2 millennia and connect with our ancient ancestors not as abstract historical figures, but as real people who lived, loved, worked, and faced a terrifying end. It is a tragedy frozen in ash and a snapshot of life granted by death. Leaving behind the ash-preserved streets of Pompeii, we journey to a different kind of mystery, one not buried by a sudden catastrophe, but abandoned by its people for reasons we are still struggling to understand. In the highlands of central Mexico, a vast and silent city stands as a testament to a civilization so powerful that its name was lost to time. We know it today as Teotihuacan, a name given by the Aztecs centuries after its fall, meaning the place where the gods were created. This was no ordinary city. At its zenith around 450 CE, it was one of the largest and most influential urban centers on the entire planet, a bustling metropolis that dwarfed any contemporary city in Europe, with a population that may have reached 200,000 people. It was a place of such immense scale and spiritual power that later cultures could only explain its existence as the work of giants or deities. Walking down the city's main thoroughfare, known today as the Avenue of the Dead, you are immediately struck by a sense of deliberate, awe-inspiring order. This central axis runs for over a mile and a half, perfectly aligned 15.5 degrees east of north, a orientation that seems to be precisely calibrated with celestial events. The avenue is flanked by the massive footprints of what were once grand palaces and temple platforms, all leading the eye toward two colossal monuments, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. The Pyramid of the Sun is a breathtaking feat of engineering, one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient world. Its core is made of over 1 million tons of sun-baked adobe bricks, all hauled into place without the use of the wheel, pack animals, or metal tools. Climbing its 246 steps to the summit, you stand where priests once performed rituals that they believed were essential to maintaining the very order of the cosmos, with views across a city that was a physical manifestation of their worldview. What makes Teotihuacan truly fascinating, however, is not just its size but its role as an ancient international hub. This was a melting pot of cultures long before the term was ever coined. Archaeological evidence reveals distinct ethnic neighborhoods within the city enclaves for Zapotecs from Oaxaca, Maya from the southern lowlands, and other groups from across Mesoamerica. These communities weren't conquered peoples, they were likely merchants, artisans, and diplomats who came to live and trade in this powerful center. The city was an industrial powerhouse, with hundreds of workshops mass-producing obsidian tools, exquisite orange pottery, and elaborate ceremonial masks that were traded across thousands of miles. This incredible diversity suggests Teotihuacan was a cosmopolitan capital whose influence was based not just on military might, but on economic and ideological pull, a place where different peoples came to share ideas, goods, and religious beliefs. The art that adorned its buildings offers a vivid, if still partially mysterious, window into this world. Unlike the Maya, who left behind detailed historical records on stone stelae, the people of Teotihuacan expressed themselves through breathtaking murals painted on the walls of their temples and elite compounds. These murals are not scenes of conquest or portraits of boastful kings. Instead, they are vibrant, complex depictions of a lush spiritual universe. We see a goddess dripping with water and jewels, believed to be a giver of life, a paradise filled with flowing rivers and blooming flowers, and priests adorned with elaborate headdresses performing sacred rites. The art points to a society where religion was the central organizing principle, a collective belief system that may have downplayed individual rulers in favor of a more communal identity, which is why we still do not know the name of a single king or emperor who ruled this vast domain. Then, around the middle of the 6th century, something went terribly wrong. The story of Teotihuacan's fall is one of archaeology's great puzzles, with no clear villain or single catastrophic event. Evidence points to a slow, painful decline. In several areas of the city, we find signs of deliberate, violent destruction. Certain temples and statues along the Avenue of the Dead were systematically smashed and burned, suggesting not an outside invasion, but a possible internal uprising, a revolt against the ruling priestly class and the rigid system they upheld. This internal strife may have been sparked by a prolonged drought that crippled agriculture, or by the overexploitation of the surrounding forests for construction and fuel, leading to soil erosion and a diminished ability to feed the massive population. The delicate social contract that held this diverse city together simply shattered. People gradually left, and within a few generations, the great metropolis was completely abandoned, its grand avenues silent, its pyramids slowly being reclaimed by the earth. For centuries, it lay dormant, a ghost city known only to the local communities who lived in its shadow. Its second life began when the Aztecs, migrating into the Valley of Mexico in the 13th century, stumbled upon these incomprehensible ruins. They were awestruck. They could not believe that mere humans could have built such a place, so they incorporated it into their own mythology, declaring it the birthplace of their gods and the site where the current sun was brought into existence. They conducted their own pilgrimages and burials among the ruins, honoring a civilization whose name they never knew. It was this Aztec reverence that eventually guided Spanish chroniclers and much later modern archaeologists to the site. Excavations in the 20th century peeled back the layers of soil to reveal the stunning murals and the immense scale of the urban plan, forcing the world to recognize Teotihuacan not as a legend, but as a real, peerless capital that shaped the course of Mesoamerican history for centuries after its fall. Moving from the cosmic order of Teotihuacan, we arrive at a site whose very existence became a battleground for historical truth. In the rolling hills of southeastern Africa, the stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe stand as a monumental rebuke to centuries of colonial prejudice, a powerful testament to a sophisticated African civilization that mastered trade, architecture, and statecraft long before European contact. The name itself, from the Shona language, simply means great stone houses, a straightforward description that belies the complexity and grandeur of the place. This was far more than a village. It was the royal capital of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, a powerful state that from the 11th to the 15th centuries CE dominated the flow of precious goods from the African interior to the vibrant ports of the Swahili coast on the Indian Ocean. From here, a network of traders managed a lucrative exchange, sending vast quantities of gold, ivory, and copper eastward, and receiving in return fine ceramics, glass beads, and luxurious textiles from as far away as Persia and China. The most immediate and striking feature of Great Zimbabwe is its architecture, a stunning display of skill that continues to inspire awe. The builders employed a technique known as dry stone walling, constructing immense, free-standing walls without any mortar whatsoever to bind the stones. Instead, they carefully selected and shaped granite blocks, stacking them with such precision that the structures have remained standing for over 600 years. The scale is staggering. The Great Enclosure, the largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa after the Egyptian pyramids, features a perimeter wall that is over 800 feet long and rises 32 feet high in some sections, with an estimated 1 million individual blocks used in its construction. Within this massive wall lies the iconic conical tower, a solid stone structure nearly 30 feet tall whose exact purpose remains a mystery. Was it a grain silo, a symbolic granary representing the king's wealth, or a phallic symbol related to fertility rituals? The skill required for such construction speaks of a highly organized society with specialized craftsmen, advanced engineering knowledge, and a powerful central authority capable of mobilizing a large labor force. For the Shona people, the descendants of its builders, Great Zimbabwe has always been a place of deep spiritual and historical significance, woven into their oral traditions and identity. However, when the first European explorers and colonists arrived in the late 19th century, they were confronted with a reality that completely contradicted their racist worldview, which insisted that complex stone architecture and advanced civilization were impossible in Black Africa. Unable to reconcile the evidence before their eyes with their own biases, they concocted a series of fantastical and offensive alternative theories. Some, like German explorer Karl Marx, who publicized the site in 1871, claimed it was the legendary mines of King Solomon or the palace of the Queen of Sheba, built by Phoenicians or other ancient Near Eastern peoples. Others suggested it was the work of Arab or Persian traders. The very idea that the local African people could have been the architects of such grandeur was dismissed out of hand, a denial driven by the political need to justify colonization by framing Africa as a continent without history, waiting for European civilization to arrive. This deliberate misappropriation of the site's origins had real and damaging consequences. Early excavations were little more than treasure hunts, focused on finding artifacts that could support these biblical fantasies rather than understanding the culture that built it. The damage was compounded during the era of Rhodesia, a white minority-ruled state that actively suppressed the true history of Great Zimbabwe. For decades, school textbooks taught the myth of foreign origins, and the racist government even restricted access to the site for Black Zimbabweans, fearing that its true history would fuel movements for independence and majority rule. It wasn't until after a hard-fought war of liberation, when the nation gained independence and proudly took the name Zimbabwe in 1980, that the site could be fully embraced as a national symbol and its true history authoritatively restored through proper scientific archaeology. That archaeological work has painted a vivid picture of a thriving cosmopolitan capital. The ruins are divided into three main areas: the hill complex, believed to be the spiritual and royal center, the great enclosure, likely a royal residence, and the valley complex, a series of smaller ruins that housed the general populace. At its peak, the city was home to an estimated 18,000 people. Finds of Chinese Celadon pottery, Persian glass, and Arabian coins within the ruins provide tangible proof of its vast trade networks. The wealth generated from controlling the gold trade funded the construction of these magnificent stone structures and supported a complex society with a clear social hierarchy, artisans, and a powerful monarch known as the Mambo, who ruled from this stone capital. The city's decline around the 15th century appears to be linked to a combination of environmental factors, such as overgrazing and the depletion of local resources, and political shifts as trade routes possibly moved elsewhere, leading the population to gradually disperse and establish new centers of power. The story of Great Zimbabwe's rediscovery is therefore a story of two reclamations. First, the physical uncovering of the stone walls from the vegetation that had grown over them, and second, the far more important reclamation of its narrative from the grip of colonial myth. Its recognition as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and its enduring image on the nation's flag and currency cement its status as a powerful icon of African achievement and resilience. It stands as an irrefutable stone testament to the fact that complex urban societies, artistic brilliance, and international economic power were not exclusive to Europe or Asia, but flourished across the African continent, waiting only for the world to be ready to see them and listen to their true story. While the grand stone walls of Great Zimbabwe testify to a known and continuous cultural legacy, our next city presents a mystery of an entirely different magnitude, a civilization so advanced and yet so thoroughly forgotten that its very language remains a secret to us today. Journey with us now to the plains of modern-day Pakistan, where over 4,000 years ago, one of the world's first great urban experiments was underway. This is Mohenjo-Daro, a name that means Mound of the Dead in the local Sindhi language, a Sama title for a place that was once teeming with vibrant, sophisticated life. Along with its sister city Harappa, it was the beating heart of the Indus Valley civilization, a culture that flourished across a region larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, yet one that vanished so completely from human memory that its existence wasn't even suspected until the 1920s. What archaeologists uncovered was nothing short of revolutionary. This was a metropolis of staggering modernity, a city built on a grid plan so precise and regular that it would put many modern developers to shame. Its main streets, some over 30 feet wide, ran straight north-south and east-west, creating organized city blocks filled with uniformly sized baked brick homes. This wasn't haphazard growth. This was a society that valued order, efficiency, and perhaps even a degree of social equality. Walking through these streets in 2500 BC, you would have encountered something unparalleled in the ancient world: a comprehensive city-wide sanitation system. Nearly every single house had its own dedicated bathroom and a toilet that channeled waste into a sophisticated network of covered drains that ran beneath the streets, emptying into larger sewers on the outskirts of the city. This concern for public health and urban hygiene is a level of civic planning that wouldn't be seen again in a city of this size for over 3,000 years. The centerpiece of this urban marvel was the Great Bath, a large, watertight public pool built with finely fitted bricks and sealed with a layer of natural tar. Surrounded by a colonnade and rooms that suggest it was part of a larger citadel complex, this structure was almost certainly not for everyday bathing. Most experts believe it served a ritual or religious purpose, a place for ceremonial purification that was central to the community's spiritual life. The sheer investment of labor and resources into this single structure tells us that Mohenjo-Daro was a society with a powerful central authority, one capable of organizing large-scale projects for the public good, and one that placed a high value on concepts of cleanliness and communal ritual. The people of this city were also master craftsmen and active participants in a vast trade network that stretched across the ancient world. Archaeologists have found workshops for bead-making, metalworking, and pottery, producing goods of exceptional quality. They developed a system of standardized weights made from chert stone that were used across the entire Indus Valley region, indicating a highly developed sense of commerce and possibly even a form of economic control. Small, square seals carved with images of animals like bulls, rhinos, and elephants, and topped with a still undeciphered script, were likely used to mark goods and signify ownership for trade. The discovery of Indus Valley goods and seals in Mesopotamian cities confirms that merchants from Mohenjo-Daro were sailing across the Arabian Sea, exchanging their wares with the great civilizations of the West. This brings us to the most tantalizing and frustrating artifact of all, their writing. The Indus script, found on thousands of seals, pottery fragments, and copper tablets, consists of over 400 different symbols, but despite decades of effort by the world's top linguists and cryptographers, it remains completely unread. It is one of the great outstanding puzzles of archaeology. Without a Rosetta Stone, a parallel text in a known language, we cannot hear their voices. We don't know the names of their kings or gods, we don't know their myths or laws, and we have no first-hand account of their daily thoughts. This silence makes their achievements all the more remarkable. They built this stunningly organized society entirely without the written proclamations and royal boasts that define our understanding of other ancient cultures. Then, around 1900 BC, the lights began to go out. The story of Mohenjo-Daro's end is as enigmatic as everything else about it. There is no evidence of a single catastrophic invasion. Instead, the city shows signs of a slow, grinding decline. Later construction work seems shoddier, with houses partitioned into smaller units, suggesting a breakdown in social order and civic authority. The most prominent theory points to environmental catastrophe. The mighty Indus River, the lifeblood of the civilization, may have shifted its course or been disrupted by massive tectonic movements, destroying the agricultural base that fed the urban population. Other evidence suggests a prolonged and devastating drought, a centuries-long dry spell that would have made life in the great cities unsustainable. The people didn't necessarily die out. They likely simply dispersed, migrating eastward in smaller groups and gradually abandoning their urban way of life, their sophisticated knowledge fading away over generations until all that was left were the silent mud brick mounds. For over 3,500 years, those mounds sat undisturbed, their secrets hidden until an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, R.D. Banerjee, began excavations in 1922. What he and subsequent teams unearthed was a civilization that forced a complete rewrite of history books, proving that complex urban life in South Asia began 1,000 years earlier than previously believed. Among the countless finds, one small object seems to speak across the millennia with startling immediacy: a 4-inch-high bronze statue of a young woman, confidently posed with one hand on her hip and adorned with a stack of bangles. Known as the Dancing Girl, she is not a goddess or a queen, but an ordinary person, captured with such vitality and realism that she effortlessly bridges the vast gap of time, reminding us that a truly advanced society is measured not just by its grand structures, but by the art and humanity it leaves behind. From the enigmatic silence of Mohenjo-Daro, we travel to a city whose name was not just forgotten, but deliberately and violently erased from history, a city whose very memory became a cautionary tale for its conquerors. On the sun-drenched coast of North Africa, the Phoenician settlers who founded Carthage in the 9th century BC chose their location with the shrewd eye of master merchants. They saw a perfect natural harbor, a strategic promontory jutting into the Mediterranean that placed them at the crossroads of everything. This wasn't just a new colony. It was the ultimate trading post, a gateway between the mineral-rich lands of Spain, the grain fields of Sicily and North Africa, and the luxury markets of the eastern Mediterranean. From this powerful base, the Carthaginians, who called themselves the Punic people, built a maritime empire that was the envy of the ancient world, their mighty ships, known as quinqueremes, becoming the unchallenged masters of the sea lanes for centuries. The true source of Carthage's wealth and power was its unmatched prowess as a seafaring nation. They weren't just traders, they were innovators and explorers who pushed the boundaries of the known world. Their ships ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, establishing trade routes down the Atlantic coast of Africa and possibly as far north as Britain in search of tin, a vital component for making bronze. To protect their commercial secrets and maintain their monopoly, they spread terrifying tales of sea monsters and impossible waters, a brilliant disinformation campaign to deter competitors. Their government was effectively a corporation run by a council of wealthy merchant families and 2 annually elected chief magistrates known as Sufis. This oligarchic system prioritized stability, profit, and naval dominance above all else, creating a society that was pragmatic, cosmopolitan, and incredibly wealthy, but one that would eventually clash with a very different kind of power rising in the West: the land-based, militaristic, and relentlessly expansionist Roman Republic. The inevitable collision between these two superpowers unfolded over more than a century in a series of 3 devastating conflicts known as the Punic Wars. The First War, fought largely over control of Sicily, taught Rome how to build a navy from scratch and fight at sea. But it was the Second War that cemented the legend of Carthage in the Western imagination, thanks to one of history's most brilliant and tragic military commanders, Hannibal Barca. In an audacious move that stunned the Romans, Hannibal did the impossible. He marched his army, complete with war elephants, from Spain across the treacherous Alps and into the heart of Italy itself. For over a decade, he humiliated Roman legion after Roman legion in a series of brilliant tactical victories, most famously at the Battle of Cannae, where he encircled and annihilated a much larger Roman force. Yet, despite his genius on the battlefield, Hannibal could never secure a final, decisive political victory. The Roman Republic refused to surrender and gradually turned the tide, eventually carrying the war back to the gates of Carthage itself. The third and final Punic War was less a war and more a predetermined execution. By the middle of the 2nd century BC, Carthage had been stripped of its empire and its military might, reduced to a prosperous but vulnerable trading city in North Africa. Rome, driven by the paranoid and vengeful rhetoric of Senator Cotto the Elder, who ended every speech with the phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," found a flimsy pretext to attack. The ensuing siege lasted 3 years, but the outcome was never in doubt. When the Roman legions under Scipio Aemilianus finally breached the walls in 146 BC, the orders were explicit and brutal: total annihilation. The city was systematically looted, burned, and razed to the ground. The famous story that the Romans salted the earth around the ruins to symbolically sterilize the land and prevent its rebirth is likely a later literary invention, but it powerfully captures the absolute and vengeful finality of their intent. They weren't just defeating an enemy, they were attempting to exterminate its memory from the world. Yet, the story of Carthage doesn't end there, embodying a profound resilience that even Rome's fury could not completely extinguish. The location was simply too valuable. A century after its destruction, Julius Caesar himself proposed rebuilding it, and under his heir Augustus, a new Roman city of Carthage was constructed directly on top of the ashes of the old. This new city became one of the great metropolises of the Roman Empire, a major Christian center and a key province, but the cycles of history continued. Vandal invasions, Arab conquests, and shifting trade routes that favored other ports like Alexandria gradually chipped away at its importance. A series of earthquakes further damaged the grand Roman structures, and over the centuries, the once great city faded back into the landscape, its stones quarried for other buildings, its memory fading into local legend until its original Punic identity was almost completely obscured. Its modern rediscovery began in the 19th century, not with archaeologists but with a French novelist, Gustave Flaubert, researching his historical novel Salammbô, visited the site and became fascinated by the few visible ruins, helping to spark a renewed European interest. This led to systematic excavations that began to peel back the layers of Roman occupation to reveal the ghost of the original Phoenician city beneath. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of the 2 iconic circular harbors, the commercial port and the hidden, inner military port designed to shelter hundreds of warships. They found Tophet, a sacred precinct containing the urns of thousands of children, which ancient Roman sources claimed was evidence of child sacrifice to the gods Baal Hammon and Tanit. While the interpretation of this site remains a deeply controversial and debated topic among historians, it has contributed to the complex and often dark reputation of Carthaginian religion. These digs have provided priceless insights into Phoenician art, commerce, and daily life, revealing a culture that was far more nuanced and influential than the biased Roman accounts would have us believe, a civilization whose legacy of exploration and trade shaped the Mediterranean world long after its capital had been wiped from the map. Emerging from the silence of Carthage's erased legacy, we find a city whose story is not one of utter erasure, but of a different kind of tragedy, a place that became a ghost not by being forgotten, but by being remembered all too well for its defiance. In the heart of the Syrian desert, the oasis of Palmyra was a brilliant, improbable flower blooming in the sand, a city whose very existence was a testament to the power of geography and human ambition. This was no minor trading post. It was the ultimate middleman, the indispensable link in the chain of commerce that connected the two great superpowers of the ancient world, the Roman Empire in the west and the Parthian, later Persian, Empire in the east. Caravans of 1,000 camels laden with silks from China, spices from India, pearls from the Persian Gulf, and glassware from Rome would converge on this lush watering hole after weeks of perilous travel. The Pomerans didn't just provide respite, they provided security, logistics, and expertise, taxing the goods and growing immensely wealthy by mastering the art of the deal in a landscape where no one else could survive, let alone thrive. This immense wealth was poured directly into the sandstone of the desert, transforming the oasis into a breathtaking open-air museum of architectural fusion. Palmyra's grandeur was a conscious statement of identity. Walking down the Grand Colonnade, a nearly 4,000-foot-long avenue lined with towering columns, each adorned with stone brackets that once held statues of wealthy merchants and dignitaries, you witnessed a unique aesthetic language. The Temple of Bel was not a purely Greek or Roman temple. It stood on a massive platform in the Near Eastern tradition, yet its outer colonnade and detailed cornices were classically Greco-Roman. The funerary towers, where wealthy families laid their dead in elaborate multi-story tombs, featured portraits carved in a distinctive local style, with frontal, large-eyed figures wearing ornate Parthian-style jewelry and military attire, often accompanied by inscriptions in Pomeran Aramaic. This wasn't a clumsy imitation of foreign styles. It was a confident, sophisticated synthesis, a visual declaration that the Pomerans were a people of the world, blending the best of East and West into something entirely their own. For centuries, this delicate balancing act worked beautifully. Palmyra was a proud and privileged ally of Rome, enjoying considerable autonomy while benefiting from the stability of the Roman peace. But in the tumultuous 3rd century CE, the Roman Empire itself was teetering on the brink of collapse, rocked by civil war, plague, and relentless pressure on its frontiers from the newly ascendant Sasanian Persian Empire. Into this power vacuum stepped a figure of legendary ambition, Queen Zenobia, portrayed in later histories as a woman of stunning beauty, fierce intelligence, and immense cultural refinement, fluent in Egyptian and Greek, and supposedly descended from Cleopatra's. Zenobia seized control of Palmyra after the death of her husband, King Odenathus. Seeing Rome's weakness, she embarked on a breathtaking military campaign that would make her a legend. Her armies swept through the Roman provinces of Arabia, Egypt, and much of Anatolia, for a brief and dazzling moment carving out a Pomeran empire that stretched from the Nile to the Bosphorus, with herself as its Augusta, or Empress. Zenobia's audacious challenge to the Roman Emperor Aurelian was ultimately a bridge too far. The reeling empire found a moment of strength under this capable soldier emperor, who marched east to confront the usurper. After a series of battles, Aurelian's legions besieged and captured Palmyra itself in 2072 CE. The fate of Zenobia is shrouded in romantic legend. Some accounts say she was captured while trying to flee to Persia and was paraded through Rome in golden chains during Aurelian's triumph, later to retire to a villa in Tivoli. The fate of her city, however, was brutally clear. As a warning to any other would-be separatists, Aurelian allowed his troops to sack Palmyra. Though the city was later partially rebuilt as a Roman garrison, its special status and its wealth were gone forever. The final death knell came centuries later when shifts in global trade routes, particularly the rise of sea travel and the shifting Silk Roads, bypassed the desert caravans entirely, robbing Palmyra of its very reason for existence. The people left, the sand slowly began to reclaim the colonnades, and the city faded into a distant memory, known only to the Bedouin who camped among its ruins. Its reintroduction to the Western world came in the 1600s, when European travelers like the Englishmen Halifax and Wood published engravings of the spectacular ruins, sparking a wave of neoclassical fascination. For centuries, it was a destination for intrepid scholars and tourists, a symbol of romantic decay in a distant land. Then, in our own lifetime, Palmyra's story took a horrifyingly modern turn. In 2015, the terrorist group ISIS seized control of the area. Recognizing the potent symbolism of the site, they set about systematically destroying it. They used explosives to blow up the Temple of Bel and the Arch of Triumph, and they brutally executed Khalid al-Assad, the 82-year-old Syrian archaeologist who had dedicated his life to studying and protecting the city, when he refused to reveal where hidden artifacts had been moved for safekeeping. This was not mere vandalism. It was ideological warfare, an attempt to erase a past that celebrated cultural mixing and pre-Islamic history, to sever a people's connection to their own heritage. Yet, even in the face of such wanton destruction, the human drive to preserve and remember has proven resilient. Using the extensive photographs, plans, and 3D scans made by archaeologists over the years, teams are now working on ambitious digital and physical reconstruction projects. Russian experts, in collaboration with Syrian authorities, have already begun using original blocks and modern materials to re-erect some of the fallen columns. While these efforts are sometimes controversial, with some conservators arguing for stabilizing the ruins rather than rebuilding them, they send a powerful message that the value of a place like Palmyra transcends its physical stones. It represents the enduring human spirit of exchange, the beauty that arises when cultures meet rather than clash, and the idea that history belongs to all of humanity. Palmyra's journey from cosmopolitan crossroads to rebel capital, from forgotten ruin to modern martyr, and now to a symbol of hope, reminds us that while stones can be shattered, the stories they tell and the ideals they represent are far harder to destroy. Leaving behind the sun-bleached stones of Palmyra, we plunge into a world of a different kind of mystery, one shrouded not in desert sands, but in the dense, living green of a rainforest canopy. Imagine the soundscape, the distant cry of howler monkeys, the chatter of parrots, and the constant, humid hum of insect life. Now, push through the thick undergrowth and suddenly emerge into a vast clearing, where the jungle reluctantly gives way to stone, and your gaze is forced upward and upward again toward the sky. Here, in the heart of Guatemala, the ancient Maya built not just a city, but a mountain range of their own making. This is Tikal, and its towering temples are perhaps the most iconic and awe-inspiring symbol of a civilization that mastered its world with breathtaking intellectual and architectural force. Tikal's story is one of endurance and ambition on a staggering scale. Its history stretches back over 1,000 years, with its foundations laid as early as the 4th century BC. But it was during the classic period of Maya civilization, around 700 CE, that it reached its glorious zenith. This was no simple village. It was a sprawling, powerful city-state that governed a vast territory and may have been home to 100,000 people or more. At a time when London was a modest Roman outpost, Tikal was a teeming metropolis, a nexus of politics, religion, and commerce whose influence reverberated across the Maya world. Its ruling dynasties, with names like Jaguar Paw and Stormy Sky, presided over a complex society of nobles, priests, artisans, and farmers, all bound together by a shared worldview and a deep reverence for the cycles of time and nature. The city's architectural genius is immediately overwhelming. The Maya engineers transformed the flat rainforest landscape into a sacred topography of power. They constructed immense limestone pyramids, some soaring over 200 feet tall, with stairways so steep they seem to lead directly into the heavens. The most famous of these, Temple I and Temple Roman II, face each other across the Grand Plaza, creating a ceremonial heart of the city that still takes your breath away. Climbing the worn steps of the surrounding structures today, you look out over a sea of green, with the tops of other temples piercing the canopy like stone islands, a visceral reminder that this was once a bustling urban center, not an isolated ceremonial site. The acoustics of the great plazas were so carefully engineered that a speaker could be heard clearly by thousands of people without shouting, a feature that must have made royal proclamations and religious rituals utterly mesmerizing events. Beyond the sheer scale, the Maya of Tikal were intellectual giants. They were obsessive astronomers, tracking the movements of Venus, Mars, and the Sun with uncanny precision from their rooftop observatories. This wasn't just academic. Their elaborate calendars, which could measure time with more accuracy than the European calendars of the same era, dictated the timing of wars, agricultural cycles, and sacred ceremonies. They believed time itself was cyclical, and their rulers were tasked with maintaining the cosmic order through ritual and bloodletting ceremonies to appease the gods. They developed the most sophisticated writing system in the Americas, a complex blend of logograms and syllabic signs carved onto towering stone monuments called stelae. These stelae weren't just art, they were history books recording the births, accessions, military victories, and deaths of their kings, providing us with a detailed, if still partially decoded, chronicle of their world. The city was also a place of spectacle and sport. The twin ball courts with their steeply sloping sides were the stage for a game that was far more than simple recreation. Using only their hips, elbows, and knees, players would maneuver a heavy solid rubber ball through stone rings high on the court walls. The game was deeply ritualistic, often representing the Maya creation myth and the eternal struggle between the lords of the underworld and the heroic twins. While the exact outcome of the game is debated, some carvings suggest that the captain of the losing team, or perhaps the winning one, could be sacrificed, his death seen as the ultimate offering to ensure the renewal of the world and the continuation of the seasons. Then, around the 9th century, the unthinkable happened. The rhythm of construction halted. The carving of new stelae celebrating kings and conquests ceased. The great plazas fell silent. Tikal, along with the other great lowland Maya cities, experienced what we now call the classic Maya collapse. This wasn't a single, sudden event, but a slow, painful unraveling over decades. The evidence points to a devastating confluence of crises. A prolonged, severe drought revealed by analysis of lake sediment cores would have led to catastrophic crop failure and famine. This environmental pressure likely ignited brutal warfare between rival city-states like Tikal and Calakmul, a conflict recorded on their own monuments as they fought over dwindling resources. Population density may have also outstripped the capacity of their agricultural systems, leading to widespread deforestation and soil erosion. The social contract between the divine kings and their people shattered. When the rains failed and the gods seemed not to answer the rulers' rituals, their power evaporated. The people didn't necessarily die out. They simply walked away from the grand stone cities, dispersing into smaller, sustainable communities elsewhere, leaving Tikal to the relentless embrace of the jungle, which swallowed it whole within a generation. For over 1,000 years, Tikal slept, its secrets guarded by the very forest that consumed it. Its rediscovery by the outside world is a tale of romantic adventure. While local Maya communities never forgot its existence, it was introduced to the West by explorers like Ambrosio Tut, a gum collector, and officially documented by government officials in the 1840s. But it was the extensive excavations led by the University of Pennsylvania in the 1950s and 60s that truly pulled Tikal back into the light. Teams battled malaria, stifling heat, and dense vegetation to meticulously clear and restore the temples, uncovering tombs filled with jade, exquisite pottery, and clues to a history far more complex than anyone had imagined. The discovery of the tomb of the great ruler Jasorchan Kayawil I in Temple I, surrounded by priceless offerings, was a watershed moment connecting the grand architecture to a specific, powerful individual from the city's golden age. Today, Tikal is more than an archaeological site. It is an experience. To stand in the Grand Plaza at dawn, as the mist rises and the howler monkeys roar, is to feel the weight of history and the profound achievement of the Maya. Their story is not one of a mysterious people who disappeared, but of a resilient culture that faced immense challenges. Their descendants still live in the region, preserving languages and traditions that stretch back millennia. Tikal's silent stones remind us that even the most brilliant civilizations exist in a delicate balance with their environment, and that the greatest monuments we build are ultimately a testament to the human spirit's drive to reach for the heavens, to understand the cosmos, and to leave a mark that, even if reclaimed by the jungle for a time, will never be completely erased. From the humid, jungle-shrouded silence of Tikal, we journey now to a windswept plateau in the highlands of central Turkey, to a city whose very stones tell a story of geopolitical savvy, imperial ambition, and a sudden, catastrophic silence that would echo for millennia. This is Hatusa, the formidable capital of the Hittite Empire, a civilization that stood as one of the three great powers of the late Bronze Age, locked in a complex dance of warfare and diplomacy with Egypt and Assyria. Unlike the soaring pyramids of the Maya, Hatusa's power was expressed through immense, cyclopean fortifications walls built from gigantic, irregular stones so massive that later generations would believe only mythical giants could have placed them there. Perched on a rugged landscape, the city was a statement of impregnable strength, a fortress capital designed to withstand any siege and project the image of an unshakable power to both its subjects and its rivals. The scale of Hatusa's defenses is immediately humbling. The city sprawled across a vast area, protected by over 4 miles of these monumental walls, punctuated by towering gateways. The most famous of these, the Lion Gate and the Sphinx Gate, were flanked by massive stone sculptures, their stoic animal guardians staring out across the Anatolian plains, serving as both a warning to enemies and a symbol of the royal authority that protected those within. Within these walls, the city was a meticulously organized administrative hub. A fortified inner city contained the royal acropolis, grand temples, and vast, windowless storage magazines that could hold enough grain to feed a population of up to 50,000 people for years, a crucial strategic advantage in times of war or drought. The heart of the empire beat within the palace archives, where a bureaucracy of scribes maintained a meticulous record of the empire's soul on clay. The true revolution in our understanding of the Hittites came not from a golden treasure, but from a library of fire-hardened mud. In the early 20th century, excavations led by German archaeologist Hugo Winkler uncovered an astonishing trove, over 30,000 clay tablets, all inscribed in the intricate wedge-shaped script of cuneiform. This was not merely a random collection. It was the entire state archives of a superpower, a filing system of empire that had been baked and preserved by the very fires that likely consumed the city during its downfall. For decades, these tablets were unreadable, their language a mystery. Then, in a feat of decipherment as dramatic as any code-breaking story, the Czech linguist Bedřich Hrozný proved in 1915 that the language was an early Indo-European tongue, a distant ancestor of languages like English, Greek, and Hindi. Suddenly, the Hittites could speak to us directly from the depths of the 2nd millennium BCE. What these voices revealed was nothing short of transformative. The Hittites were not the barbaric horde some ancient sources had suggested. They were sophisticated legislators, pragmatic diplomats, and meticulous record keepers. Their laws, detailed on these tablets, show a complex society with a surprising sense of justice. Rather than demanding an eye for an eye, their legal code often prescribed compensation and fines, even for serious offenses. But the most famous document of all is the Kadesh Peace Treaty, negotiated between the Hittite king Hattusili III and the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II around 1259 BC. This agreement, which ended decades of costly warfare, including the famous, inconclusive Battle of Kadesh, is the oldest known surviving peace treaty in the world. Its text, which survives in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, doesn't just detail borders and non-aggression pacts. It includes a mutual defense clause and, most remarkably, a pledge that the gods of both lands would bear witness and hold the other party accountable if they broke their word. A copy of this treaty even hangs today at the United Nations headquarters as an ancient model of diplomacy. Yet, for all its power and sophistication, Hatusa met a sudden and violent end. Around 1200 BC, the entire city was burned and abandoned. This was not an isolated event. It was part of a wave of destruction that swept across the Mediterranean and Near East, a period historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse. In the span of just a few decades, the intricate international system of trade and diplomacy that connected empires from Greece to Egypt simply disintegrated. The precise cause of Hattusa's fall remains one of history's great cold cases, with compelling evidence for several suspects. Some point to the mysterious Sea Peoples, a confederation of maritime raiders mentioned in Egyptian texts who ravaged coastal cities, though how they could have threatened a heavily fortified inland capital like Hatusa is unclear. Others argue for internal rebellion or invasion by the nomadic Kaskians from the northern hills. The most persuasive theories, supported by archaeological and tree ring data, point to a perfect storm of catastrophic climate change, a prolonged, severe drought that led to famine, destabilizing the empire from within and making it vulnerable to any external shock. The grain silos that once guaranteed its resilience stood empty, and the social contract between the king and his people broke down. The darkness that followed was nearly absolute. The Hittite Empire shattered into small, Neo-Hittite city-states that lingered on in Syria, but the imperial heartland in Anatolia was largely emptied of its population. The knowledge of cuneiform writing vanished. The great capital, Hatusa, was completely forgotten, its name erased from the maps and memories of the succeeding ages. For over 3,000 years, its story was silent, its role as a great power utterly lost to history, known only through fleeting and often dismissive references in the Bible and Egyptian records. Its rediscovery and the decipherment of its archives forced a complete rewrite of the history of the ancient world, inserting a major, missing player back into the narrative. The fate of Hatusa stands as the ultimate example of how fragile even the most powerful and well-organized civilizations can be when faced with systemic collapse, and how completely a world can vanish, leaving only baked clay tablets behind to whisper its secrets to a future that had long forgotten its name. If the sheer defensive might of Hatusa represented one kind of Bronze Age power, the city we turn to now embodied its polar opposite, a place where art, elegance, and a joy for life seemed to take precedence over fortifications and fearsome gates. Imagine a complex so vast and so bewildering in its design that it gave birth to one of humanity's most enduring myths. the labyrinth, a maze built to contain the monstrous half-man, half-bull Minotaur. For centuries, this was the stuff of pure legend. Then, at the dawn of the 20th century, an ambitious English archaeologist named Arthur Evans arrived on the sun-drenched island of Crete, purchased the entire site of a large mound called Kephalla, and began to dig. What he unearthed would stun the world and force a complete reimagining of European history, revealing a sophisticated, peaceful, and breathtakingly artistic culture that predated classical Greece by over 1,000 years. This was Knossos, the ceremonial and political heart of the Minoan civilization, and it was unlike anything ever seen before. The first thing that strikes you about the palace of Knossos is its sheer, sprawling scale. This was not a single building but a vast, multi-storied complex of over 1,300 rooms spread across more than 6 acres, a veritable city unto itself. Its layout, with corridors that twist and turn, rooms that open unexpectedly into grand courtyards, and stairways leading to unknown levels, is genuinely confusing. It's easy to see how this intricate plan, combined with the mythologies that lingered in the local culture, convinced Evans he had found the actual labyrinth of King Minos. But this wasn't a maze designed to trap a monster. It was a brilliantly engineered administrative, religious, and economic engine. The design, with its clever light wells and open courtyards, allowed for excellent ventilation and the circulation of natural light, creating a comfortable environment for the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who lived and worked within its walls. Stepping into these rooms, the Minoans come alive not as conquerors but as aesthetes. The walls are adorned with some of the most vibrant and naturalistic art to survive from the ancient world. Frescoes depict lithe acrobats leaping over the backs of charging bulls in a dangerous ritual known as Taurocathapsia. The famous Prince of the Lilies sports an elaborate plumed headdress and moves with a graceful confidence. Dolphins swim playfully across plaster walls, and elegant court ladies with elaborate hairstyles and sophisticated fashions gossip in gardens filled with whimsical blue monkeys. This art is dynamic, fluid, and bursting with life, reflecting a society that seemed to celebrate nature, movement, and beauty above militaristic glory. Notably absent are the typical scenes of pharaohs smiting enemies or kings leading armies into battle that were common in Egypt and the Near East. The Minoans, it appears, projected power through culture and commerce, not conquest. Their sophistication extended far beyond art into the very practicalities of daily living. The palace featured an advanced and extensive sanitation system that rivals even that of the much later Romans. They had terracotta pipes for running water and drainage, with a sophisticated system that could carry away waste from toilets, yes, flush toilets on the upper floors. They had systems for collecting rainwater and channels built beneath the floors to help cool the rooms during the hot Cretan summers. This concern for hygiene and comfort speaks to a remarkably modern sensibility, a society that valued the well-being of its people and had the engineering knowledge to achieve it on a grand scale. The source of all this wealth and refinement was the sea. The Minoans were the undisputed masters of the Eastern Mediterranean, a thalassocracy, an empire based on sea power rather than land control. Their sleek, ocean-going ships depicted in their art connected them to a vast trade network. They imported tin from as far away as Britain and Afghanistan to alloy with local copper to make bronze, the material that gave the age its name. They traded their exquisite pottery, saffron, olive oil, and fine textiles for Egyptian gold, ivory from Africa, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. This made Knossos a cosmopolitan hub, a place where ideas, styles, and goods from across the known world intermingled, fostering an incredibly creative and innovative culture. Then, around 1450 BC, the lights began to flicker out. The end of Knossos and Minoan dominance is a story of successive calamities. First, a colossal volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, one of the largest volcanic events in human history. This cataclysm would have generated massive tsunamis that smashed into the northern coast of Crete, devastating its fleet and coastal settlements. It would have blanketed the island in a thick layer of ash, crippling agriculture and causing a period of frigid climate change. In this weakened state, the Minoans were vulnerable. The next blow came from the north, invasion by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, a more warlike and austere people who saw a wealthy, weakened prize. The archaeological record shows a layer of destruction at Knossos, followed by a clear cultural shift. The Linear A script used by the Minoans disappears, replaced by Linear B, which we now know was an early form of Greek used by the Mycenaeans for administrative records. The vibrant Minoan art style gives way to more martial and simplistic Mycenaean motifs. The great palace was eventually abandoned, and over the centuries, its memory faded into the local legend of a labyrinth and a minotaur, a tale the ancient Greeks would tell for 1,000 years without knowing the glorious civilization that inspired it. Arthur Evans's work was monumental but also controversial by modern standards. So convinced was he of what he was finding, he undertook extensive and often heavy-handed reconstructions. Using concrete, he rebuilt columns, staircases, and entire sections of the palace, and he hired a Swiss artist to restore the frescoes, sometimes based on scant evidence. While this gives visitors today an unparalleled sense of what the palace might have felt like in its prime, it makes it incredibly difficult for archaeologists to distinguish between original Minoan work and Evans's 20th century imagination. Yet, despite these controversies, his achievement is undeniable. He didn't just excavate a ruin, he resurrected an entire civilization that had been utterly erased from history, proving that the myths of the Greeks were not pure fiction, but distant, distorted echoes of a very real and magnificent golden age that laid the foundational stones for all of European culture. While the Minoans of Knossos drew their power from the sea lanes of the Mediterranean, another city would rise to greatness on the opposite shore of that same sea, its fortune built not on trade alone, but on the incredible ambition of one local boy who conquered the world and then poured its wealth back into his hometown. On the coast of what is now Libya, Leptis Magna began as a humble Phoenician trading post, a convenient stop for ships moving along the North African coast. But under the Romans, it blossomed into one of the empire's most dazzling and important cities, a place where the arid African landscape met the refined elegance of Roman urban design, creating a unique and powerful fusion. Its location was its destiny, positioned at the mouth of the Wadi Lebda River, which provided not only a natural harbor but also access to the incredibly fertile hinterlands that became the breadbasket of the empire, producing vast quantities of olive oil that were shipped from its docks to every corner of the Roman world. The city's trajectory was utterly transformed by the rise of a single, extraordinary individual, Lucius Septimius Severus. Born in Leptis Magna in the year 145 CE to a family of local Punic aristocrats, Severus embarked on a military and political career that would see him rise through the ranks during a period of intense civil war, eventually emerging as the sole emperor of Rome. Unlike previous emperors who hailed from Rome or Italy, Severus was a provincial, and he never forgot his roots. Once in power, he showered his birthplace with an almost unimaginable level of imperial patronage, embarking on a monumental building spree designed to elevate Leptis Magna from a prosperous provincial city to a second Rome, a showcase of imperial power and sophistication on the edge of the empire. He didn't just give it a facelift, he fundamentally rewrote its urban DNA. The Severan building projects were staggering in their scale and ambition. A magnificent new harbor was constructed, with a lighthouse, massive quays, and warehouses that could handle the increased flow of goods from across the empire. A grand new forum was laid out, a vast paved plaza surrounded by colonnades and lined with statues of the imperial family and local dignitaries. At one end stood a breathtaking new basilica, a colossal hall for law and commerce whose soaring columns of red and grey granite imported from Egypt were carved with intricate scenes of the gods and of the emperor himself. The city's main street, the Decumanus Maximus, was widened and lined with a new colonnade, creating a magnificent processional way that connected the harbor to the heart of the city. Walking through Leptis Magna in the early 3rd century would have been an experience of overwhelming imperial grandeur, a deliberate statement that the center of the Roman world could exist anywhere the emperor willed it, even on the coast of Africa. This wasn't just about vanity, it was about economics. Under Severus, Leptis Magna became the epicenter of a lucrative trade in exotic goods from the African interior. Ivory from elephants hunted deep in the Sahara, wild animals like lions and leopards captured for the gladiatorial games in Rome, and precious woods and spices flowed through its markets. The city's elite, many of whom were of mixed Punic and Roman descent, grew immensely wealthy, and they invested their fortunes in building lavish townhouses. The floors of these homes were covered in some of the most exquisite mosaics ever created in the Roman world, vibrant and detailed scenes depicting the bounty of the land and sea, from leaping dolphins and intricate geometric patterns to dramatic mythological tableaus, all designed to showcase the owner's culture, wealth, and sophistication. The golden age of Leptis Magna was brilliant but tragically short-lived. The decline of the Severan dynasty and the broader political and military crisis that engulfed the Roman Empire in the 3rd century began to take its toll. As imperial authority weakened, the city became more vulnerable. Then, in the 5th century, the Germanic Vandal tribe, who had crossed from Spain and conquered much of Roman North Africa, swept through the region. While they didn't completely destroy Leptis Magna, their rule disrupted the long-distance trade networks that were the city's lifeblood. The final blow, however, was environmental. A series of powerful earthquakes damaged the city's infrastructure, and the Wadi Lebda River, which had been the source of its prosperity, began to silt up the magnificent harbor Severus had built, turning it into a malaria-ridden swamp and cutting the city off from the sea. Without trade and with its water supply compromised, the population gradually abandoned the city. Then, the desert itself began the process of preservation. The same sand dunes that had always threatened the outskirts of the city now slowly, patiently, began to reclaim it. Drifting sands filled the streets, buried the forums to the tops of the columns, and gently entombed the villas and their beautiful mosaics. Within a few centuries, Leptis Magna had vanished from view, a ghost city known only to a few local nomads, its memory fading into legend just as its stones were fading beneath the Sahara. This blanket of sand, however, acted as a perfect protector. It shielded the marble from being quarried for other buildings. It prevented the mosaics from being shattered by looters or the elements, and it kept the city frozen in a state of remarkable preservation, waiting for a future generation to uncover it. That rediscovery began in earnest in the early 20th century, when Italian archaeologists during the colonial period started the painstaking process of excavating the city from its sandy tomb. What they revealed was nothing short of miraculous, because it had been abandoned rather than destroyed by war, and because the sand had protected it so completely. Leptis' Magna offered a more complete picture of a Roman city than almost any other site. Visitors today can walk through the original Roman theater with its stage backdrop still standing 3 stories high and imagine the performances that once echoed here. They can stand in the vast Severan Forum and look up at the columns that once impressed visitors with the might of Rome. They can stroll through the baths and see the intricate hypocaust heating systems and marvel at the stunning mosaics that still lie in situ on the floors of the villas. The city feels less like a ruin and more like a place that has simply been emptied of its people for a day, a breathtakingly intact snapshot of Roman urban life on the frontier of empire. Its story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the very forces of nature that can erase a city, the shifting sands, the silting rivers, can also, paradoxically, become the instruments of its salvation, preserving its glory for 1,000 years until we are ready to learn from it once more. Imagine a city built not from stone but from earth itself, rising from the stark, sun-baked plains of northern Peru. This is Chan Chan, the colossal capital of the Chimu Empire and the largest adobe city ever constructed in the ancient world. At its peak, it sprawled across nearly 8 square miles, a vast urban labyrinth that was home to an estimated 60,000 people. In a landscape defined by one of the most arid deserts on Earth, the very existence of such a metropolis seems like an impossible mirage. The Chimu people didn't just build a city here, they performed a sustained act of alchemy, turning barren sand into a thriving, sophisticated civilization through a combination of sheer ingenuity and an intimate understanding of their harsh environment. Their story is one of brilliant adaptation, a testament to human resilience, but also a sobering lesson in the vulnerabilities that even the most advanced societies can face. The lifeblood of Chan Chan and the entire Chimu kingdom was not gold or military might but water. The city's incredible scale was made possible by a monumental feat of hydraulic engineering that rivals any in the ancient world. The Chimu constructed an extensive network of canals to divert water from the distant Chikama River through the desert to their fields and reservoirs. These were not small irrigation ditches, they were massive, precisely engineered channels that stretched for dozens of miles, carving through the dry terrain to bring life-giving water to thousands of acres of agricultural land. They built large, walled reservoirs within the city itself to store this precious resource, ensuring a steady supply through seasonal droughts. This mastery over water allowed them to produce enormous surpluses of crops like maize, beans, and squash, which in turn supported the dense population of artisans, priests, administrators, and laborers who never had to farm themselves. Their entire economy and social structure was built upon this controlled defiance of the desert. The city's architecture is a direct reflection of this ordered, hierarchical society. Chan Chan was not a single, chaotic mass of buildings. It was a carefully planned complex of 10 large, walled enclosures called ciudadelas. Each of these walled citadels was essentially a royal compound, covering vast areas and containing its own temples, burial platforms, residences, and storage chambers. They were built sequentially, each one for a new ruler or Chimu Kapak, who would rule from it in life and be entombed within it in death. The walls surrounding these compounds are staggering in their scale, some standing over 30 feet high even today after centuries of erosion. But it's their surfaces that truly astonish. The adobe walls are adorned with thousands of intricate, repeated patterns carved directly into the mud plaster. These friezes depict a world dominated by the sea, stylized fish, crashing waves, pelicans, and mythical sea creatures. This pervasive marine imagery is a powerful declaration of their identity. Though they lived in a desert, their wealth and power flowed from the Pacific Ocean, whose rich fishing grounds provided another critical pillar of their sustenance. The design of the city was a masterpiece of environmental adaptation. The towering, thick adobe walls were not just for defense or display, they were a brilliant form of passive climate control. Their mass provided superb insulation against the extreme temperature fluctuations of the desert, keeping the interior courtyards and rooms cool during the scorching days and retaining warmth through the surprisingly chilly nights. The layout of the compounds was equally clever. Narrow passageways between high walls created natural wind tunnels, channeling the cool Pacific breezes through the city to provide ventilation. Plazas were often built sunken below ground level, providing shelter from the strong coastal winds and creating cooler, more protected communal spaces. Every aspect of Chan Chan's design speaks to a people who weren't fighting their environment, but were instead listening to it and engineering their world in harmony with its demands. This magnificent, self-sufficient world, however, could not withstand the shifting tides of power. In the late 15th century, around 1470 CE, a new imperial force was rising in the Andes, the Incas. The expansionist Inca Empire, under the leadership of Topa Inca Yupanqui, set its sights on the wealthy Chimu kingdom. The Chimu were formidable opponents, but the Incas employed a devastatingly simple strategy. They didn't need to breach Chan Chan's immense walls to conquer it. They simply targeted its source of life. Inca armies marched up the Moch Valley and systematically destroyed the canals that diverted water from the Chicama River. With their water supply severed, the fate of the city was sealed. Facing certain starvation and thirst, the Chimu ruler had no choice but to surrender. The Incas absorbed the kingdom, looted Chan Chan of its gold and silver, which was reportedly immense, and exiled many of its most skilled artisans to their own capital, Cusco. The city was left as a provincial center, its glory and autonomy extinguished. The final blow came decades later with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. While they were more interested in the legendary gold of the Inca Empire than an already subjugated adobe city, their arrival introduced old-world diseases and further disrupted the social and economic order. The remaining population gradually dwindled, and the desert, patient and relentless, began its reclamation project. The same winds that the Chimu had so cleverly channeled now whipped sand through the abandoned streets and plazas. The rare but occasional torrential rains, a weather phenomenon called El Niño, slowly dissolved the intricate mud brick walls and eroded the beautiful friezes back into the earth from which they came. Within a few generations, Chan Chan was buried, its location known only as a vast, mysterious mound to the local people, its true scale and significance hidden beneath the dunes. Its modern rediscovery began in the 19th century with explorers and archaeologists who recognized the immense mounds for what they were, not natural hills but the ghosts of a great city. Systematic excavations throughout the 20th century revealed the breathtaking scope of the ciudadelas, the complexity of the irrigation systems, and the artistic beauty of the adobe reliefs. Unlike stone cities, Chan Chan is incredibly fragile, and ongoing conservation efforts are a constant battle against wind, rain, and looters. The city's story forces us to expand our view of pre-Columbian America beyond the well-known narratives of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca. The Chimu were a powerhouse in their own right, creators of a unique urban and artistic tradition that thrived for centuries in one of the planet's most challenging environments. Their rise was a story of brilliant adaptation, and their fall serves as a timeless reminder that controlling a civilization's source of water is ultimately the key to controlling its destiny. If the sprawling adobe complex of Chan Chan represents a civilization's brilliant adaptation to its environment, then Persepolis stands as the ultimate monument to imperial ambition, a city designed not just to rule but to awe. Carved into the very heart of the Iranian plateau, this was not a capital of administration or commerce. It was the magnificent ceremonial stage for the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen, the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Founded by the visionary King Darius I around 518 BCE, Persepolis, or Parsa to its builders, was conceived as a powerful symbol of a new kind of world order. It was here, on an immense artificial terrace, that the King of Kings would receive representatives from every corner of his vast domain during the lavish New Year festival, a spectacle designed to showcase not just Persian power, but the breathtaking diversity and unity of the empire itself. Approaching the city, a visitor's first sight would have been the daunting double staircase leading to the Gate of All Nations, flanked by colossal stone bulls with the heads of bearded men. These Lamashu statues were guardians, but they were also a statement of cultural fusion, drawing on Mesopotamian artistic traditions to serve a Persian imperial vision. Passing through this gate, you entered a world of calculated grandeur. The entire complex was a masterpiece of architectural planning and symbolic messaging. The heart of Persepolis was the Apadana, a colossal audience hall that could hold 10,000 people. Its roof was supported by 72 elaborately carved stone columns, each soaring 60 feet high, a forest of stone that must have inspired sheer wonder in anyone who stepped inside. But the true genius of Persepolis lies not in the scale of its buildings, which were immense, but in the intricate stories told on its walls. The stone reliefs that line the grand staircases of the Apadana are perhaps the most revealing artifacts of the Achaemenid worldview. This is not art celebrating military conquest or the slaughter of enemies. Instead, we see a serene and orderly procession of delegates from the 23 subject nations, each group led by a dignified Persian or Median usher. The figures are depicted with meticulous attention to their unique ethnic characteristics, their hairstyles, their hats, their clothing, and the gifts they carry. Here are Elamites bringing lions, Libyans with an antelope, Ethiopians presenting ivory, and Greeks bearing intricately woven cloth and silver vessels. This magnificent frieze is a stone documentary of the empire's multicultural tapestry, a visual declaration that the strength of Persia lay in its ability to unite a vast array of peoples under a single, stable, and prosperous administration. It speaks of a philosophy of power that valued incorporation and tribute over annihilation. This administrative brilliance is further confirmed by the other great discovery at Persepolis, the fortification and treasury tablets. These thousands of clay tablets written in Elamite cuneiform are not epic poems or royal boasts, they are bureaucratic receipts. They meticulously record the payment of workers, the distribution of food rations to everyone from dignitaries to pregnant women, and the movement of goods across the empire. They reveal a hyper-efficient, centralized economy capable of managing a workforce of thousands from diverse backgrounds, all paid fairly and fed from the imperial storehouses. The empire functioned on a system of standardized weights and measures, and a royal road and relay system that allowed messages to travel from one end of the empire to the other in a matter of days. Persepolis was the glittering crown of this system, a place where the wealth and talent of the entire known world were channeled to glorify the vision of the Persian emperor. This vision of eternal power, however, came to a sudden and violent end. In 330 BCE, the young Macedonian king Alexander the Great, having defeated the Persian emperor Darius III in battle, marched on Persepolis. According to the ancient historians, what happened next was both a calculated act of political theater and a drunken tragedy. After looting the treasury of its unimaginable wealth, a hoard of gold and silver, so vast it took 5,000 camels and 20,000 mules to carry it away, Alexander allowed his troops to sack the city. Then, during a wild symposium, the Athenian courtesan Thais, supposedly seeking revenge for the Persian burning of the Athenian Acropolis a century earlier, persuaded an intoxicated Alexander to set the palace ablaze. The dry cedar ceilings and supporting beams went up in an inferno, the heat so intense that it shattered the great stone columns and burned the color from the limestone reliefs. Whether a deliberate act of symbolic retribution or a reckless accident, the burning of Persepolis was a defining moment, signaling the end of the Achaemenid Empire and the transfer of power to a new Hellenistic age. Though the Achaemenid dynasty was gone, the site was not completely abandoned overnight. It remained an important regional center for centuries under the successive rule of the Seleucids, Parthians, and Sasanians, who still recognized its symbolic potency. But its time as the center of the world was over. Gradually, the desert sands and winds did their work, burying the scorched ruins and the grand staircases under layers of soil and time. For over 1,000 years, Persepolis slept, known to the local people only as Takht-i-Jamshid, the throne of Jamshid, a legendary prehistoric king from Persian mythology. Its true history was utterly forgotten in the West, its memory preserved only in the hostile accounts of Greek historians who portrayed the Persians as decadent Oriental despots, a biased narrative that would dominate the European imagination for 2 millennia. Its modern reawakening began in the 1930s when excavations by the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, led by archaeologists James Henry Breasted and Erich Schmidt, began the systematic work of clearing the rubble and revealing the glory beneath. Their work, which employed innovative aerial photography from a biplane, uncovered the magnificent plan of the terrace and brought the exquisite reliefs back into the light. This rediscovery did more than just add another pin to the archaeological map. It forced a profound shift in the historical narrative. The real Persepolis, with its multilingual inscriptions, including Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, and its art celebrating peaceful tribute, stood in stark contrast to the Greek version of events. It revealed the Achaemenid Empire not as a tyrannical monster, but as a sophisticated, tolerant, and brilliantly organized state that respected the cultures it governed. The city's fate is a powerful duality. It is both a timeless symbol of imperial achievement and a stark reminder of the flames that inevitably follow overweening pride, a magnificent ruin that continues to whisper the true story of a civilization that once dared to unite the entire world under a single, awe-inspiring roof. While the empires of Persia and the Maya were building their capitals with grand proclamations of power, a far more ancient and enigmatic story was quietly waiting to be unearthed in a dusty river valley on the other side of the world. In the Soup Valley of Peru, a place of stark, arid beauty where the desert meets the foothills of the Andes, lies a complex of massive earth and stone mounds that had long been mistaken for natural hills. For centuries they were ignored, their significance completely overlooked. Then, in the late 1990s, a determined Peruvian archaeologist named Ruth Shady Solis began a systematic investigation of these mounds. What her team uncovered would send shockwaves through the archaeological community and force a complete rewrite of the history books. This was Caral, a city that flourished over 4,600 years ago, making it the oldest known city in the Americas and a contemporary of the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Its discovery pushed back the timeline of complex urban life in the Americas by more than 1,000 years, proving that the cradle of civilization had not 2 but 3 corners: Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Peru. What makes Caral so astonishing isn't just its age, but the sheer sophistication it displays without any of the technological hallmarks we typically associate with early civilizations. This was the work of the Norte Chico people, a culture that achieved a stunning level of social complexity and architectural grandeur without two things we consider fundamental: pottery and a system of writing. They had no clay pots for storage or cooking, and they left behind no written records, no carvings of boastful kings, no lists of conquests or gods. Their entire story had to be pieced together from the bones of their buildings and the remnants of their daily lives. This forces us to completely reimagine the pathway to civilization. It suggests that human societies can achieve remarkable coordination and cultural complexity through shared belief, ritual, and communal labor, not just through the top-down control of a literate elite or the demands of military organization. They built a thriving city not for war or for glory, but for something else entirely. The city itself is a sprawling testament to their organizational genius. At its heart are 6 large pyramidal structures, with the largest, known as Pyramid Maya, standing over 90 feet tall and covering an area nearly the size of 4 football fields. Building these monuments required moving massive amounts of stone and earth in baskets, a task that would have required a large, coordinated labor force working over many generations. But Carol is more than just pyramids. The entire urban plan reveals a sophisticated understanding of design and function. There are 2 sunken circular plazas, amphitheater-like structures dug down into the earth, which were almost certainly used for public gatherings and ceremonies. There are distinct residential areas for both the elite and the common workers, suggesting a stratified society, along with evidence of workshops and kitchens. The entire complex is laid out with a clear sense of order and intention, a physical manifestation of a shared social and spiritual vision. One of the most captivating mysteries of Carol is its acoustic properties. Researchers studying the main plaza have discovered something extraordinary. The architecture itself seems to be designed to control sound. The sunken circular courts and the positioning of the platforms create a natural amplification system. A person standing in the center of one of these plazas can speak in a normal voice and be heard clearly by people standing all around the edges. This wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate design feature. It suggests that Carol was a city deeply invested in community and ritual, a place where orators, priests, or musicians could address large groups without shouting, fostering a sense of shared experience and collective identity. This focus on communal gathering over militaristic display paints a picture of a surprisingly peaceful and cohesive society. The economy that supported this grand project was as ingenious as the city itself. The North Chico people mastered their challenging environment through a system of reciprocal exchange between the coast and the valley. From the Pacific Ocean, just 14 miles away, they harvested immense quantities of anchovies and sardines, which were dried and became a crucial source of protein. From the fertile Soup Valley, irrigated by a complex system of canals, they grew crops like cotton, squash, beans, and chili peppers. But it was cotton that was the true economic engine of Carol. They grew vast amounts of it, not for clothing themselves, but to weave it into the huge fishing nets and lines needed by the coastal communities. This created a powerful economic symbiosis. The valley provided the cotton and the nets, the coast provided the fish, and both were exchanged for the other's goods at a central place like Carol. This trade in essential commodities rather than luxury items fueled the economy that allowed for the construction of the monuments and supported a large non-farming population. Then, around 2000 BC, this thriving, stable civilization simply walked away. The story of Carol's abandonment is one of its greatest puzzles. There is no evidence of invasion, no layer of ash from a volcanic eruption, no signs of violent conflict. The people appear to have left their city peacefully and deliberately, and they never returned. The most likely explanation points to climate change. Geological evidence suggests that the region may have been hit by a prolonged and devastating drought, or perhaps by a series of powerful earthquakes that disrupted the delicate water supply from the river and the irrigation canals. When the water failed, the ability to grow cotton and food collapsed, breaking the economic cycle that sustained the city. Facing environmental stress they could not overcome, the people made a pragmatic decision to disperse into smaller, more sustainable communities in other valleys, taking their knowledge and traditions with them, but leaving their magnificent stone and earth structures to the wind and the sand. For over 4,000 years, Carol sat in silence, its true nature hidden in plain sight. Its rediscovery is a powerful reminder that history is not a fixed narrative, but a story that is constantly being revised with each new shovel of earth. The work of Ruth Shady and her team has given a voice to a civilization that lacked a written language, proving that monumental achievements can be collective and peaceful, and that the human impulse to build, organize, and create meaning is a force that can emerge independently across the globe under the most surprising of circumstances. Carol doesn't just add years to a timeline, it adds a profound new chapter to the story of humanity itself, a chapter written not in clay tablets or carved stone, but in the very shape of the land and the enduring mystery of its silent, sun-baked pyramids. Perched on a remote plateau in eastern Turkey, where the winds whip relentlessly across a stark landscape, the ghost city of Ani tells a story of breathtaking artistic fusion and profound historical heartbreak. This was no ordinary medieval town. It was the magnificent capital of the Bagratid Armenian kingdom, a powerhouse so wealthy and culturally vibrant that it earned the nickname the City of 1001 Churches. While the number is poetic, the reality was a skyline punctuated by an extraordinary concentration of sacred architecture, their domes and spires creating a silhouette rivaled the greatest cities of Christendom. Its strategic location on a branch of the Silk Road was the source of its brilliance and, ultimately, its vulnerability. Ani sat at the very crossroads of continents, a natural meeting point for merchants, pilgrims, and armies moving between the Byzantine Empire, the Armenian highlands, the Georgian kingdoms, and the various Islamic caliphates to the east. This position didn't just bring wealth, it made Ani a dazzling melting pot where architectural ideas and artistic styles from across Eurasia collided and combined to create something entirely new and magnificent. Walking through the ruins today, even in their hauntingly skeletal state, you can still trace the genius of this cultural synthesis. The Cathedral of Ani, completed in the year 1001 under the guidance of the brilliant architect Teodat, is a masterpiece of Armenian ecclesiastical design. Its soaring, rib-vaulted interior and pointed arches are a stunning feat of engineering that predates similar Gothic developments in Europe by centuries, demonstrating an advanced understanding of structural physics and a desire to create vast, luminous spaces for worship. Just a short walk away stands the Church of the Holy Redeemer, a unique polygonal structure built to house a fragment of the true cross, its design both geometrically complex and profoundly elegant. But perhaps the most telling example of Ani's hybrid soul is the Church of St. Gregory of the Abughamrants. Its exterior is decorated with elaborate blind arcades and intricate stone carvings that show a clear influence of Islamic architectural motifs from the Seljuk Turks, seamlessly blended with traditional Armenian forms. This was not a city that built walls between cultures. It built bridges, and those bridges were made of stone and adorned with the most beautiful carvings of the age. This golden age of splendor was brilliant but tragically short-lived. The 11th century brought a series of hammer blows from which the city would never truly recover. First, in 1045, the Byzantine Empire, viewing the powerful Armenian kingdom with envy and suspicion, annexed Ani, absorbing it into its territorial holdings. This political takeover was followed by an even more devastating event, the arrival of the Seljuk Turks. In 1064, the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan laid siege to the city and captured it, marking the beginning of a long period of instability. While the Seljuks did not destroy Ani outright and even contributed to its architectural tapestry, their rule signaled a shift in trade routes and political power. The final, crushing blow came in the 13th century with the Mongol invasions. The ruthless armies swept through, looting and burning with a violence that shattered the city's economic backbone and decimated its population. A major earthquake in 1316 then delivered a catastrophic natural blow, toppling buildings that had already been weakened by war and neglect. The once proud capital entered a long, slow decline, gradually emptying of its inhabitants until it was completely abandoned by the 17th century, left to the mercy of the elements and the occasional shepherd seeking shelter within its crumbling walls. For over 200 years, Ani slept, a forgotten ruin known only to the local Kurdish communities who lived in its shadow. Its romantic rediscovery by the Western world is credited to the adventurous Russian explorer Nikolai Mar, who began extensive archaeological excavations in the 1890s. His teams cleared the sand and debris from the magnificent churches, documented the intricate frescoes that still adorned their walls, and published detailed plans that reintroduced Ani's glory to an astonished world. However, this scholarly excitement was soon overshadowed by 20th century geopolitics. The horrors of the Armenian genocide during the First World War and the subsequent drawing of the border between the new Republic of Turkey and the Soviet Republic of Armenia placed Ani in a cruelly symbolic position. The city's ruins ended up just on the Turkish side of a closed, heavily militarized border, a no-man's land during the Cold War. This location transformed Ani from an archaeological site into a poignant political symbol, a place of pilgrimage for Armenians worldwide who could see the spiritual heart of their medieval kingdom but were forbidden from approaching it, a constant stone reminder of loss and a fractured homeland. The modern era has brought both new threats and a glimmer of hope for preservation. For decades, the site suffered from neglect, amateur treasure hunting, and even targeted destruction. In a particularly tragic incident, half of the Church of the Holy Redeemer, which had survived earthquakes and invasions, collapsed in the 1950s after a local attempt to break apart its stone with a fire. Its other half still stands as a stark, broken monument to the passage of time and human indifference. However, recent years have seen a significant shift. Ani's designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2016 spurred renewed international attention and conservation efforts. Teams of Turkish and international archaeologists are now working to stabilize the fragile structures, protect the remaining frescoes from further erosion, and better understand the city's complex urban layout. Walking through the site today is an intensely powerful experience. You stand in the vast emptiness, the wind the only sound, surrounded by the spectral remains of churches, a massive defensive wall, a bridge over the river that now marks an international border, and the evocative ruins of a Seljuk mosque standing peacefully near the Armenian cathedral. This landscape doesn't just tell the story of one kingdom. It tells the story of the entire region, a layered narrative of creation and destruction, of faith and conflict, of artistic genius and the relentless, humbling power of time. Ani's silent stones are a testament to the beautiful civilizations that can arise when cultures meet and exchange ideas, and a solemn warning about how easily that beauty can be shattered by the forces of history, leaving behind only echoes and a profound sense of wonder. Nestled in the rolling hills near modern-day Islamabad, the ancient city of Taxila wasn't just a place of politics and trade. It was one of the ancient world's most vibrant and enduring intellectual powerhouses. For over a millennium, from the 6th century BC to the 5th century CE, this city in the Gandhara region served as a legendary crossroads of knowledge, a place where the great philosophical and spiritual currents of the East met the scientific and artistic traditions of the West. Its unique position on the pivotal trade routes connecting India to Central Asia and the Mediterranean made it a strategic prize, and it was successively ruled by a who's who of ancient superpowers: the Persian Achaemenids, the Greeks under Alexander the Great, the Indian Mauryaans, and the Central Asian Kushans. Each conqueror left their mark not through erasure but through a remarkable process of cultural layering, adding new ideas to the existing tapestry rather than tearing it down. This created an environment of unparalleled intellectual openness, a true melting pot where a scholar could study Indian Vedic texts in the morning and debate Greek metaphysics in the afternoon. The heart of this scholarly community was the ancient university, often referred to as Takshashila. While it wasn't a single, centralized campus as we imagine today, it was a sophisticated and sprawling network of monasteries and individual teachers that functioned as one of the earliest and most renowned centers of higher learning on the planet. Prospective students, having completed their basic education, would travel from across the subcontinent to seek out specific gurus renowned for their expertise in specialized fields. The curriculum was astonishingly vast and rigorous, covering 64 different arts and skills. This included not only sacred subjects like philosophy, medicine, and Buddhist scripture, but also intensely practical disciplines like archery, warfare, astronomy, and even the art of elephant riding. The most famous text on statecraft and economics, the Arthashastra, is traditionally attributed to the scholar Chanakya, who is said to have taught and strategized at Takshashila before mentoring Chandragupta Maurya to found the Mauryan Empire. This blend of the spiritual, the philosophical, and the fiercely practical created a unique educational model that aimed to produce fully realized individuals capable of both profound thought and effective action in the world. This incredible fusion of cultures found its most beautiful and enduring expression in the art that flourished in Taxila, a style known today as Greco-Buddhist. When the Greco-Bactrian kingdoms succeeded Alexander the Great's brief empire in the region, they brought with them the Hellenistic artistic tradition, with its mastery of realistic human anatomy, flowing drapery, and three-dimensional sculpture. For centuries, Buddhist art had been largely aniconic, representing the Buddha through symbols like a footprint, an empty throne, or the Bodhi tree. But under the influence of Greek artisans and their techniques, a revolutionary shift occurred. For the first time, the Buddha was given a human form, and that form was rendered with the idealized realism of a Greek god. The resulting sculptures show the Buddha with a calm, Apollonian face, his hair in waves reminiscent of Greek stylization, and his monastic robe carved to fall in soft, realistic folds like a Roman toga. This Gandharan style became the template for Buddhist art as it spread along the Silk Road into Central Asia, China, and eventually Japan, meaning the serene image of the Buddha we recognize today owes its aesthetic DNA to that unique cultural alchemy that occurred in Taxila's workshops. The city's vibrant life of the mind, however, could not forever withstand the brute force of geopolitical upheaval. The slow decline began in the 5th century CE with the violent invasions of the Huns, specifically the Hephthalites or White Huns. These were not rulers interested in preserving centers of learning or patronizing art. They were destroyers who sacked monasteries, scattered libraries, and massacred populations. The delicate economic and intellectual ecosystem that sustained Taxila was shattered. The trade routes that were its lifeblood became insecure and shifted elsewhere. Without the flow of goods and ideas, and without the royal patronage that had supported its scholars and artists, the great university gradually faded. The monks and teachers departed, the libraries were lost, and the magnificent stupas and monasteries were abandoned to the elements. Over the ensuing centuries, the ruins were slowly buried by wind-blown soil, and the memory of this great center of learning was reduced to a few scattered references in ancient texts, its physical location becoming little more than a name attached to a landscape of forgotten mounds. Its return to the world stage began in the mid-19th century, when Sir Alexander Cunningham, the founder of the Archaeological Survey of India, began systematic excavations based on the accounts of Chinese Buddhist pilgrims like Faxian and Xuanzang, who had visited Taxila at its height and left detailed written descriptions. What they unearthed was an archaeological revelation, not one city, but the ruins of 3 successive cities built on different sites nearby. They uncovered the foundations of numerous stupas, including the magnificent Dharmarajika stupa, and dozens of monasteries like the complex at Jolian, with its tiny individual cells for monks, quiet courtyards, and chapels still housing stucco statues of the Buddha. The excavations revealed a cityscape dedicated to scholarship and worship, confirming the ancient texts and bringing tangible proof of a place where knowledge had once reigned supreme. The rediscovery of Taxila did more than just add a pin to a historical map. It restored a crucial chapter in the story of human civilization, demonstrating that the pursuit of knowledge has always been a global, collaborative endeavor, and that the greatest advancements often occur not in isolation, but at the busy, vibrant intersections of the world. While the intellectual crossroads of Taxila thrived on the exchange of ideas, another city would forge its power not through philosophy, but through a fierce and final stand to preserve a way of life. In the rocky, boulder-strewn landscape of southern India, the Vijayanagara Empire built a capital of such staggering scale and opulence that it was described by Persian and European travelers as surpassing anything they had ever seen. This was not merely a city, it was the last great bastion of Hindu sovereignty in a subcontinent increasingly pressured by the expansion of Islamic sultanates from the north. Founded in 1336 by the brothers Harihara and Bukka, the empire was conceived as a city of victory, Vijayanagara, a deliberate bulwark against invasion, a place where art, culture, and faith could flourish under protection. And flourish it did for over 2 centuries, growing into a sprawling metropolitan giant that may have housed over 500,000 people, making it one of the 2 largest cities in the world at the time, a peer to Beijing and a wonder to all who beheld it. The genius of Vijayanagara lay in its masterful integration of the sacred and the profane, the spiritual and the practical, all engineered on a monumental scale. The city was strategically nestled within the bend of the Tungabhadra River, using the waterway as a natural moat and the enormous granite boulders littering the landscape as a foundation and building material. The empire's rulers were hydrological visionaries, constructing an extensive and sophisticated network of aqueducts, canals, and massive water tanks to harness every drop of seasonal rain. This system ensured a reliable water supply for the dense population, irrigated vast tracts of agricultural land to feed them, and filled beautiful stepped tanks for ritual bathing and royal pleasure. This control over water in a semi-arid region was the bedrock of their prosperity, allowing the city to thrive in an environment that would otherwise have been brutally harsh. At the heart of this prosperity was international trade. Vijayanagara sat astride the routes connecting the spice-growing highlands of southern India to the ports of the Arabian Sea. Its bustling markets were a sensory overload of precious goods, diamonds and pearls from its own mines, fine cotton textiles, and most importantly, the legendary spices of India, pepper, cardamom, and cinnamon. Arab, Persian, Portuguese, and Italian merchants all established outposts in the city, exchanging gold and silver for these coveted commodities. The wealth generated was staggering, and it was poured directly into the construction of some of the most breathtaking architecture in Indian history. The city was divided into two distinct sections: the Sacred Center, a concentration of immense temple complexes along the riverbank, and the Royal Center, a sprawling district of palaces, audience halls, and pavilions for the nobility, all surrounded by a formidable system of fortifications that stretched for dozens of miles. The temples of Vijayanagara are where the empire's devotional fervor and architectural ambition reached their zenith. These were not just places of worship, they were the economic, social, and cultural engines of the city. The Virupaksha temple, dedicated to the empire's patron deity, Shiva, remains a living site of worship to this day, its towering gateways or gopurams covered in a breathtaking riot of carved gods, goddesses, and mythological scenes. But the crown jewel is the Vitala temple, a monument to pure artistic extravagance. Its masterpiece is the Hall of Musical Pillars. Each of the main pillars is surrounded by a group of smaller, slender pillars that, when struck gently, emit clear, distinct musical notes, an incredible feat of acoustic engineering in stone that continues to baffle experts today. Standing in the temple courtyard is the iconic stone chariot, a shrine so perfectly sculpted to look like a wheeled ceremonial vehicle, complete with stone wheels that actually once rotated, that it has become an enduring symbol of India's architectural heritage. This magnificent world of stone and sound was shattered not by a slow decline, but by a single, catastrophic afternoon. In January 1565, the empire's armies met a combined force of Deccan sultanates at the Battle of Talikota. The reasons for the defeat are layered: treason by key Vijayanagara generals, the sultanate's effective use of cannon and cavalry against the empire's traditional infantry, but the result was absolute. The royal family was captured and executed, and the victorious armies marched on the now undefended capital. For 6 months, they systematically looted Vijayanagara. The temples were desecrated, the palaces were stripped of their riches, and the intricate irrigation systems were smashed. The destruction was so thorough, so vengeful, that it was less a conquest and more an erasure. The surviving population fled, and within a year, the greatest city in India was an empty, smoking ruin, its glory extinguished almost overnight. As the monsoon rains began to wash the ashes away, the jungle moved in. Creeping vines and thorny shrubs twisted around the musical pillars. Banyan trees sent roots through the cracks in the royal baths. The city, once roaring with the noise of 500,000 people, was left to the wind and the chatter of monkeys. For over 250 years it slept, known only to the local villagers as Hampi, a landscape of mysterious, giant ruins that they wove into their local myths and legends. Its rediscovery began in the early 19th century with British colonial officials and surveyors like Colonel Colin Mackenzie, who stumbled upon the vast extent of the ruins and began the painstaking process of documenting them, though they could scarcely believe such a place could have been lost to history. Modern archaeology has since peeled back the vegetation to reveal the true grandeur of the urban plan, the sophistication of its waterworks, and the sheer artistic brilliance of its sculpture. Today, as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Hampi is a place of profound contrasts. The serene beauty of its riverside setting clashes with the haunting evidence of violent destruction, a permanent record of both the heights of human creation and the depths of our capacity for annihilation. Imagine a city that didn't just fall into ruin, but vanished entirely beneath the waves, its very existence fading into the realm of myth and whispered legend. For over 1,200 years, the great port city known as Thonis to the Egyptians and Heracleion to the Greeks was just that, a ghost story, a name mentioned in a handful of ancient texts by historians like Herodotus, but with no physical proof it had ever been real. They spoke of a magnificent, wealthy gateway to Egypt, a place where all trade from the Greek world had to pass through before sailing up the Nile. They told of a grand temple where pharaohs were crowned, and of a legendary visit by the hero Heracles himself, from which the Greeks derived their name for the city. But with no ruins to point to on any map, scholars for centuries debated whether it was a real place or just a colorful fantasy, a maritime El Dorado lost to the fog of time. All that changed in the year 2000, when a team led by the visionary underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio, after years of meticulous research and geophysical surveys, finally pinpointed its location not on land, but under 30 feet of water in the murky depths of Aboukir Bay. What their dredges began to pull from the silt would stun the world and rewrite the history of the ancient Mediterranean. The first glimpses were almost beyond belief. As the clouds of sediment settled, divers weren't finding scattered fragments. They were confronting an entire city frozen in a state of suspended animation. Colossal statues of pharaohs and Egyptian gods, some standing over 16 feet tall, emerged from the darkness, their features perfectly preserved by the very mud that had buried them. A magnificent black granite statue of the god Hapi, the deification of the Nile flood, was found lying on the seafloor, a symbol of fertility now guarding a sunken world. They discovered the remains of 64 ancient ships, the largest collection of early vessels ever found, their hulls buried in the thick clay, suggesting the entire harbor was entombed suddenly, with its entire fleet still at anchor. And everywhere there were stone blocks, columns, and the foundations of buildings, all lying in a vast, sprawling underwater landscape that covered an area of over 40 square miles. This wasn't an archaeological site. It was a snapshot of a living, breathing city at its peak, captured in a single, catastrophic moment, and then sealed for over a millennium. The magic of this incredible preservation lies in the unique chemistry of its burial. The city was not built on solid bedrock, but on the unstable, water-logged clay of the Nile Delta. Over centuries, the combined weight of its massive stone temples and monuments, compounded by rising sea levels and a series of severe earthquakes and floods, caused the water-logged ground to liquefy in a process called soil liquefaction. The earth literally turned to soup beneath the city's foundations, causing entire neighborhoods to slide and collapse into the Mediterranean in a relatively short period, likely around the 8th century CE. As the structures sank, they were quickly covered by a protective blanket of fine silt and clay. This anaerobic environment, devoid of oxygen and light, prevented the growth of wood-eating organisms and slowed the corrosion of metal, effectively placing the entire city in a state of deep freeze. The very forces that destroyed it became the instruments of its salvation, protecting its treasures from looters and the eroding forces of wind and waves for over 1,200 years. The artifacts recovered from this underwater time capsule paint a vivid picture of a bustling, multicultural hub. The most significant finds are the great stone stelae or decrees carved in both hieroglyphic and ancient Greek. These slabs of stone acted as ancient billboards, proclaiming the laws and taxes of the pharaohs to the international merchants who passed through. One such decree, issued by Pharaoh Nectanebo I in the 4th century BCE, not only confirmed the city's Egyptian name as Thonis, but also detailed the tithe of 10% on all goods, including gold and silver, imported from Greece, which was to be donated to the temple of the god Neith. This single artifact provided the undeniable proof that connected the legendary names of Thonis and Heracleion as one and the same city, a place where Egyptian authority met and managed the lucrative trade from the Aegean. Walking through this city in its prime would have been an experience of sensory overload. The air would have been thick with the smells of incense, spices, and salt water. The docks would have been a cacophony of languages: Egyptian, Greek, Phoenician, as merchants haggled over cargoes of wine, olive oil, fine pottery, and papyrus. Grand temples dedicated to the supreme god Amun and his son Khonsu would have dominated the skyline, their gates guarded by the very statues now found on the seafloor. The discovery of extensive ritualistic deposits, including gold jewelry, bronze ceremonial instruments, and hundreds of ritual oil lamps, suggests this was not just a commercial port but a major religious center, a place where pharaohs came to be legitimized by the gods and where sailors made offerings for safe passage. It was the ultimate cultural melting pot, a place where Greek merchants lived under Egyptian law and worshipped in Egyptian temples, their cultures intertwining long before Alexander the Great ever set foot in the country. The rediscovery of Thonis-Heracleion is a triumph of modern technology and patient scientific exploration. Frank Godio's team uses cutting-edge tools like nuclear resonance magnetometers to detect anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried structures, and sophisticated GPS systems to map the vast site with millimeter accuracy. Every artifact raised from the seabed must undergo a years-long process of desalination in freshwater tanks to slowly leach out the corrosive salt that has penetrated its pores over centuries, a painstaking conservation effort that is as crucial as the discovery itself. The city's fate is also a powerful and timely warning from the past. Its submergence was likely driven by a combination of geological instability and a gradual rise in sea levels, a slow-moving environmental disaster that has stark parallels to the challenges faced by coastal cities around the world today. Thonis-Heracleion stands as a hauntingly beautiful monument to the power of nature, a reminder that the geography of our world is not fixed, and that even the greatest centers of human civilization can be reclaimed by the sea, leaving only legends behind until we develop the tools and the will to go looking for them. From the rose-red cliffs of Petra to the sunken statues of Thonis-Heracleion, the journeys of these 21 cities form a powerful tapestry of human ambition, adaptation, and memory. They show us that the rise and fall of civilizations is not a simple story of triumph and failure, but a complex dance with nature, technology, and our own societal choices. These places were once the pinnacle of their world's centers of trade that connected continents, hubs of learning that advanced human knowledge, and spiritual centers that gave meaning to millions. Their silence, which lasted for over 1,000 years, is a humbling reminder that no achievement, no matter how grand, is guaranteed permanence. They were swallowed by deserts, reclaimed by jungles, shattered by earthquakes, or simply abandoned when the world changed around them, their stories fading from map and memory until they became little more than legend. What truly connects these rediscoveries is the enduring human drive to uncover our own story, to piece together the fragments left behind and listen to the whispers of the past. It's a quest fueled by an insatiable curiosity, one that has taken us from the early treasure hunters like Schliemann at Troy to the high-tech, sonar-equipped teams of Frank Godio exploring the seafloor. Each of these cities was brought back to light through a combination of ancient clues, local knowledge, and relentless perseverance. The decipherment of the Hittite language from the clay tablets at Hatusa, the LiDAR technology that revealed the true scale of Angkor's sprawl, and the patient desalination of artifacts from Thonis-Heracleion all represent different chapters in our ongoing effort to understand who we are by learning who we were. This isn't just about filling in blanks on a historical timeline. It's about reclaiming lost knowledge, honoring lost cultures, and often, as with Great Zimbabwe, correcting the historical record to tell a more truthful and complete story. Perhaps the most pressing lesson these lost cities offer is for our own time. The challenges that led to their abandonment, climate change, resource depletion, political instability, and economic disruption, are not confined to the past. The prolonged drought that likely crippled the Maya at Tikal, the earthquakes that devastated Petra's water systems, and the rising sea levels that claimed Thonis-Heracleion all find echoes in the headlines of today. These ancient metropolises serve as a stark stone and sand warning system. They demonstrate the profound consequences of failing to live in balance with our environment or to build resilient, adaptable societies. They ask us to look at our own sprawling coastal cities, our agricultural systems, and our global networks, and consider what we are doing to ensure their longevity for generations yet to come. As we close this exploration of the forgotten maps of our world, I'd love to hear which of these cities captured your imagination most profoundly. Was it the hydraulic genius of the Nabataeans at Petra, the astronomical precision of the Maya at Tikal, or the underwater mystery of Thonis-Heracleion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation. If you enjoyed this journey through time, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into history's greatest mysteries. Thank you for joining me. Remember, the past is not just a series of events to be studied. It is a deep well of wisdom from which we can draw to build a more thoughtful and sustainable